Chapter 1274. In the atrium, the bricks that symbolized Zen Master Golden Lamp's reincarnation history exploded one after another. He had spent the cultivation of 3,000 lifetimes, but he had only managed to catch a glimpse of the outline. Such a thing really made people feel a little sad. Wang Ling stretched out his hand, intending to repair the broken memory bricks in the courtyard. He hadn't stopped the golden lamp from spying on him because he wanted to know exactly what sort of existence he was. Because of this, Zen Master Golden Lamp lost one of his eyes and his cultivation was greatly damaged. Wang Ling felt that he shouldn't put all the blame on the golden lamp. But at that moment, the monk stretched out his hand to stop him. Zen Master Golden Lamp shook his head with a wry smile. "I've lived 3,910 lives, and it's only in this life that I realize that I'm not invincible. The loss of my cultivation is a lesson that I must learn. There is no need for Reverend to lend a hand." Monk coughed twice. He reached out his hand and brushed his eyes. His ruined pupils were restored to their normal state. All he had left now was a type R. The crippled one would have to start cultivating from scratch. But the monk didn't regret being able to fight a true expert like Wang Ling. Even if he was injured, it was a glorious scar for the monk. Zen Master Golden Lamp smiled and said, "I feel that this life of mine is going to be more exciting than any of my previous lives." There were only 910 bricks left in his atrium. Right now, he was looking forward to passing away and turning his memories of this life into new bricks. Then, he would lay them in this courtyard and become one with the 910 bricks. "Grandmaster, can you tell us what's going on with Miss Lotus Sun now?" Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal asked at that moment. This was the reason why they had come here to see Zen Master Jin Deng. Wang Ling wasn't too surprised that Zen Master Golden Lamp knew so much. Although his combat power was stronger than Zen Master Golden Lamp's. However, his experience was still not as rich as Zen Master Golden Lamp. The mental pressure in the memory brick was great, but it did not mean that he had rich experience. The experience of 3,910 lives was placed here, and the monk knew more than him. This was also in the process of cleaning up. He was only a 16-year-old baby. In fact, Tyrant wasn't completely confident about this matter. But after spying on Wang Ling's true identity just now, Jin Deng already had his answer. Although he could only catch a glimpse of the outline and the chaotic world. However, based on the clues he had, the monk had reason to believe that what happened to the girl might be related to a mysterious place. "Do you know where Dao ancestor Wang, who established the Heavenly Dao all those years ago, established the Heavenly Dao?" Zen Master Golden Lamp said, "Before the Way of Heaven was finalized, it was said that Tao ancestor Wang had conducted countless experiments to ensure that the Way of Heaven he designed would eventually benefit all cultivators. The Heavenly Dao even has a testing ground?" Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal and Wang Ling were astonished. Legend has it that the experimental site was formed from a strand of chaos energy. It is a place with a high concentration of spiritual energy. It's difficult for ordinary creatures to survive in that place. The monk said, "Even though the Heavenly Law testing ground is only a rumor, this poor monk can guarantee that this place really exists." "What's in the lab?" "They're all useless Heavenly Dao golden men that are filled with evil and darkness. These gold men were all failed experiments. The Dao ancestor created them, but he could not bear to destroy them. Both the palm and the back of the hand are meat." Hearing this, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal sighed in his heart. Just like that, these Heavenly Dao golden men who weren't destroyed were left in that experimental site forever, sealed inside by Dao ancestor Wang. Zen Master Golden Lamp said, "And this place is also known as the Unspeakable." The Unspeakable, this was the first time Wang Ling had heard of such a place. It's not that the Heavenly Dao golden men of this generation have no memory of this place, but that the Dao ancestor was determined to hide it forever. Thus, the Unspeakable spell was set up. As long as the Heavenly Dao golden men think of this place, they will temporarily forget everything about it. The Great Shielding Spell? Wang Ling raised his eyebrows and asked telepathically. The monk smiled. Jinren is right. The Unspeakable spell is indeed similar to the Great Shielding spell. The great shielding spell may have been derived from Tao ancestor Wang's unspeakable spell. But Master, there's still something I don't understand. Senior Immortal, please speak. Why are you so sure that Miss Sun's matter has something to do with the unspeakable? I have two deductions. First, the ancient golden man who appeared next to Miss Sun is probably a failed experiment product from the unspeakable. That girl has now become a child of the void, and as the key to the void gate, there's actually a tremendous amount of power hidden in her. Golden Lamp's words were astonishing, and he was very clear about the ins and outs of the matter. Wang Ling couldn't help but marvel at his deduction ability. This Golden Lamp was indeed different from the small fries he had dealt with before. He was a capable monk. Wang Ling didn't intend to believe Golden Lamp. After a moment of silence, the monk continued, those golden men robbed her because they wanted to use the blade of the void to tear open the seal of the unspeakable. That's a seal set up by Tao ancestor Wang. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was shocked. As far as I know, the children of the void do indeed have this ability. The monk said, previously, the master of the void went through so much trouble to search for the children of the void. I'm afraid their real purpose wasn't to invade Earth, not to invade. They wanted to protect the children of the void. The monk said, as long as the children of the void return to the void, the curse on Miss Sun won't work, and the ancient golden men of the unspeakable won't be able to run to the void world to find her. Hearing this, Wang Ling was suddenly enlightened. So this was what the master of the void meant when he said that the children of the void would eventually return to the void. At this point, Wang Ling had learned most of the truth from Golden Lamp. This so-called yin and yang death calamity was the root of the disaster left behind by the ancient golden men of the unspeakable. So here was the crux of the problem. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal pondered for a bit, then finally asked, Master, apart from returning to the void and becoming part of it, is there any other way for Miss Sun to get rid of the ancient golden men? Of course there is a way, and I'm afraid that Ling Zhenren is the only one who can do it now. At that moment, the monk turned to look at Wang Ling. Wang Ling looked at him, his expression unruffled. The monk, the way is to wipe out the entire unspeakable in one fell swoop. Chapter 1275. Wipe them all out in one go? It was indeed an extremely simple and crude answer. But regarding this matter, Jin Deng actually had something to say. The unspeakable place. This poor monk has actually tried to visit it many times, but not once has he been able to enter it, Jin Deng said. He had the experience of visiting the unspeakable place many times, but he always got lost halfway and never even stepped through the gate. What about the return spell? Wang Ling asked telepathically. He knew that the Death Heavenly Tao had already captured the ancient gold men. If he used the return spell to teleport back with the ancient gold men, he felt that it would not be difficult to enter the unspeakable land. Reverend, your thinking is too simple. This penniless monk had also used this return sending art in the past. However, the situation is much more complicated than I imagined, said the monk. The unspeakable was derived from chaos, and it was difficult for ordinary cultivators to walk in that kind of space for a long time. Even immortal Zhenyuan, who had the ability to roam the Milky Way, couldn't avoid it. Only cultivators from the god's domain are allowed to stay there for a while, and the time limit is no more than 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was lost in thought. This time was about the same as Ultraman's transformation. It was too short. Just like Kushuan. There's nothing we can do. If we get lost in the primal chaos, we'll never be able to come back. The golden lamp shook its head. In short, the structure of the unspeakable land was like an egg. The eggshell was like a boundary, the egg white was the chaotic circle, and the egg yolk was the unspeakable place. Even if a normal cultivator accidentally entered, they would only enter the range of the egg white. He could only stay there for 3 minutes at most. It was almost impossible to touch the yolk layer. Tyrant recalled the scene when he found the unspeakable place in the past. He couldn't even enter the core yolk layer. How long can Master stay in the egg white layer? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal asked curiously. Not long, just a little bit more time than normal cultivators, the monk said modestly. How long? 3 hours? 30 days. If it's Lingzhenren, I'm afraid it'll be even longer, said monk. He felt that Wang Ling could stay in there for at least 300 years, Jin Deng said, but even this penniless monk has yet to reach the core layer. Because of the restriction? Asked Wang Ling. This was the only possibility he could think of. That's right. Jin Deng nodded. Unless Dao ancestor Wang had set up a restriction back then. Otherwise, the return skill would not have failed. As the founder of the heavenly Dao, it was too easy for him to set up such a restriction. As long as the great teleportation spell's authority was turned off in the unspeakable land, no one would be able to use heavenly Dao spells to directly arrive there. Thus, Wang Ling's wish to use Lord Ma to directly teleport to the unspeakable fell through. However, he still felt that there was another way. After all, he not only possessed the power of the heavenly Dao created by Dao ancestor Wang. Divine Dao, Fate Dao, Shadow Dao, there had to be one that suited him. In my opinion, if we want to enter the unspeakable land and completely destroy this place, the key is to break the restriction. The monk frowned. He opened his hand and gathered his memories of entering the unspeakable land into a ball of spiritual energy on his palm. Wang Ling and grenade throwing reached out to touch it. That memory rushed into their minds like a three-dimensional movie. In his memory, Tyrant was in a chaotic world where light and darkness interweaved. The structure of the space here was extremely complex, and everything was falling apart. When the monk had mistakenly entered this place back then, his kasaya had been torn to shreds, and he had been naked when he entered this space. Wang Ling and grenade throwing's eyes hurt a little, and they hurriedly withdrew their hands. My apologies, this poor monk needs to deal with it a little. Realizing his gaffe, Golden Lamp's old face flushed red. He had almost forgotten that he had mistakenly entered the chaotic circle of the unspeakable land back then. The scene of his Daoist robe being invaded by the power of chaos and directly being torn to shreds. After dealing with the memory magic ball again, Wang Ling and grenade throwing senior immortal touched it again. Wang Ling saw that the monk in front of him was covered in a thick layer of mosaic, which instantly made the whole scene even stranger. Then, the monk wandered back and forth in the chaotic circle. It took him several days before he finally found the core. Is this the unspeakable land? In the memory, Golden Lamp looked at a place in front of him that looked very much like a floating island in the universe, which was wrapped in a faint golden film of light. The powerful power of heavenly Dao that emanated from that place was breathtaking. At that time, the monk already knew what kind of place he had broken into. This was the heavenly Dao test field that Dao ancestor had left behind back then. Countless sealed but powerful evil heavenly Daos were locked up in there. Driven by his curiosity, the monk instinctively wanted to take a look. Given his ability to shrink the ground into an inch and travel 10,000 li in one step, it shouldn't have been difficult for him to break into the unspeakable land. However, the unspeakable land was clearly right in front of him, but he couldn't get any closer. Red-faced, the monk looked like he had done everything he could, but from beginning to end he couldn't move an inch forward. The unspeakable land was so close at hand, and so far away that it was hard for him to imagine it. At that moment, the monk put away his memory ball and said with emotion, Lingzhenren and Senior Immortal saw that scene back then, and it's still hard for this poor monk to forget it. The unspeakable land was clearly so close to this poor monk, but this poor monk was like a monkey trapped in the Five Fingers Mountain, and was unable to take that step forward to reach the heart of the land. Looking at Master's memory, you used a variety of movement techniques, but in the end, it seemed that no matter how you moved, you still stayed where you were. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said, could this unspeakable land just be an illusion? Like a mirage, it looks very close, but is actually very far away. This poor monk understands Senior Immortal's meaning. Back then, this poor monk also had a similar idea. Jin Deng said, so, after I confirmed the location of the unspeakable land, I made sufficient preparations not long after and planned to try it a second time. It took me 20 days, and the situation was the same as before. The monk really couldn't use words to describe the concept of 20 days. He had used the shrinking ground into an inch spell to travel like crazy for 20 days. Based on a normal journey, in 20 days, he would have already made a round trip to and fro the Milky Way 20 times. It had taken immortal Jinyuan 1,000 years to travel the entire Milky Way outside the Milky Way. The contrast was very obvious. So, what on earth is the restriction on the unspeakable land? This poor monk thinks it's probably some kind of restriction set up by Tao ancestor, Jin Deng said. I wonder if Ling Jinren and Senior Immortal played a keyword warning game? Before the two of them talk, they first decide which forbidden words they can't use, and then talk to each other. Whoever mentions the forbidden words loses. Based on this poor Taoist's many years of speculation, the restriction set up by Tao ancestors should be similar to this game. Could it be that monks can't enter? It's not that this poor monk hasn't thought of this, so in 3241, this poor monk deliberately kept his hair long and elegant. In the end, he still wasn't able to enter. Men can't enter? This penniless monk tried it in the 3903 era. In this life, this poor monk deliberately reincarnated as a woman. This is also the only life in which this poor monk has changed gender. Also, at the beginning, this poor monk wasn't used to it, and was always standing and peeing. Chapter 1276. To enter the unspeakable land, one had to guess what kind of restriction Tao ancestor Wang had set up. Based on Golden Lamp's 1,000 lives of reincarnation, the monk had already eliminated a lot of wrong options in his infinite time. Unfortunately, he had never found the right answer. In the year 2908, this penniless monk guessed that the Tao ancestors' restriction might not allow one to enter the forbidden land by flying. Therefore, this penniless monk chose the nearest spot and used constant backflips to enter the unspeakable land. In the end, I failed. In 2909, this poor monk guessed that Tao ancestors' restriction might not allow people with single eyelids to enter. For this reason, this poor monk poured strength into my fingernails and personally cut off my own double eyelids, but in the end I still failed. Master, I don't think there's any need to talk about failure. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal did his best to keep smiling. He felt that if he continued listening to Golden Lamp, his image of the monk as an eminent monk would completely collapse. At that moment, the situation seemed to be stuck again. The monk knew the exact location of the unspeakable land. But even if he had the ability to destroy the entire forbidden area, if he couldn't enter it, it was all empty talk. Jinren, this poor monk has something to say, but I don't know if I should say it, Golden Lamp suddenly said at that moment. He had a serious expression on his face, as if he was calculating something. The unspeakable land. This could be considered one of the few regrets in the monk's life. For thousands of years, he had been trying to break through and challenge the barrier, but he had failed again and again. The monk was already a little disheartened. After witnessing Wang Ling's power, he felt that if he combined it with his accumulated experience, they might be able to work together. For this reason, he quickly began to formulate a plan in his mind. What he was about to say to Wang Ling now was one of his plans. Wang Ling's eyes widened slightly as he looked at Golden Lamp with an expression that said he was all ears. Ling Jinren, to tell you the truth, if you and I work together, we might really be able to break through the chaos circle outside the forbidden area. The monk said, but there's also a risk. Judging from the sudden appearance of the ancient gold men, it's likely that there are already some evil ancient gold men in the forbidden area who have used their own methods to escape the seal. If we force our way through now, there's a high chance that our home will be directly raided. Raided? This poor monk used to think that as long as I stood guard on earth, foreign enemies wouldn't dare cause trouble. The monk sighed and said, later, I realized that this penniless monk was overthinking. Those ancient gold men are not stupid. They have been operating quietly and have not launched a large-scale invasion. It's only because this poor monk and Ling Jinren are on earth that they can sense great power, so they haven't taken any large-scale actions. Grandmaster, do you mean that if you and Brother Ling break the forbidden area together, those ancient gold men will directly attack? Very likely. The monk said, this penniless monk's predictions are almost never wrong. In 1,000 lifetimes, this penniless monk has only been wrong once. May I ask, Grandmaster, which time was it? Asked Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. Just now. I thought I could beat Ling Jinren, but I guessed the beginning, not the end. Therefore, my opinion is, before Ling Jinren and I work together to break through the level, we need to help other people transcend their tribulations. The monk said, we need to help some trustworthy brothers so that they can form a group to transcend their tribulations and ascend successfully. Wang Ling, it wasn't that he hadn't thought about this before. The main thing was that it would cause a huge commotion, which Wang Ling was very worried about. Although the consumption of spirit qi on Earth had already reached a point where it could be reversed, when someone advanced, the consumption of spirit qi would gradually increase. This was also the purpose of the true immortal convention between countries. By limiting the growth of realms, the pressure on the consumption of spirit qi would be reduced. If Ling Jinren trusts this poor monk will be fully responsible for this matter. Ling Jinren only needs to provide assistance from the side. The monk smiled. The true immortal convention has been in place for so many years that tradition should have been broken long ago. This Earth needs to complete an upgrade. What changes will there be after the upgrade? True immortals will be further liberated. Finally, with time, Earth might be able to establish a channel with the domain of the gods. The monk said, of course, there are also unchanging factors. That is, even if the upgrade is completed, there might still be no one who can beat Ling Jinren. Saying this, Golden Lamp couldn't help sighing. Jinren, how lonely. Wang Ling, elsewhere, Death Heavenly Tao was conscientiously performing its duty as it stood guard in front of Lotus Sun's bed. They wouldn't let those ancient gold men who had scuttled out continue to cause trouble. After the second wave was over, Death Heavenly Tao used the Death Note to personally capture those 3 ancient gold men. For a long time, the hospital was calm and peaceful. Lotus Sun would still do sit-ups from time to time. But as long as Death Heavenly Tao was here, the girl wouldn't have to taste the pain of having her soul crudely stolen by the ancient gold men. The situation looks stable, but it's actually far from it. Death Heavenly Tao couldn't help sighing. He had stayed here to prevent the ancient gold men from stealing the girl's soul in order to alleviate her pain. But that didn't stop this inexplicable, yin-yang death curse from continuing to wreak havoc on her body. Furthermore, he had already summoned the 3 ancient gold men to interrogate them. In the end, Death Heavenly Tao didn't understand a single word the ancient gold men said. He was completely unable to communicate with them. Your Excellency, do you know why this is happening? The Heavenly Tao language has been reformed many times, and is no longer the same as before. They're speaking the most primitive version of the Heavenly Tao language, and they even have a local accent. It would be a miracle if anyone could understand them. Death Heavenly Tao gave an example. It's like a foreigner who has lived in the Northeast speaking Wenzhou dialect. When all sorts of things are mixed together, it's like the whispering of the devil. In the current situation, Death Heavenly Tao didn't dare leave Lotus Sun's side at all. He was afraid that if he left, these ancient gold men would take advantage of the situation to attack again. But even if he caught these 3 gold men now, it didn't seem to be of any use. The language barrier was a huge problem. Just when he was at his wit's end, the girl lying quietly in the medical cabin in front of him was actually starting to change again. Your Excellency Death Heavenly Tao, are you seeing this? Audjua's eyes were filled with horror. He rubbed his eyes repeatedly as he observed what was happening to the girl's body. I'm seeing it, it's not an illusion. Death Heavenly Tao also started to get nervous. Because Lotus Sun's body seemed to be turning transparent. Chapter 1277. Death Heavenly Tao and Audjua hadn't expected the girl to gradually become transparent. But very quickly, Death Heavenly Tao realized what was going on. I never thought the legend would actually be true. What legend? Audjua asked anxiously. It said that in order to prevent people from being resurrected without limit through means like the death substitute talisman, Tao Ancestor deliberately set up a secret spell. So, I purposely set up a secret technique. As long as the resurrection exceeds a certain number of times, the existence of the resurrected will decrease. Decrease her presence? Audjua was astonished. When her presence decreases to the end, Miss Sun will be completely transparent. In theory, she won't be considered dead, but no one will be able to touch or hear her, and no one will be able to hear what she says to other people. Then what's the difference between this and being dead? The difference is that she's not on the heavenly Tao's death list, and doesn't even have the chance to be reincarnated. She can only drift in the world forever as a spirit of nothingness. Audiobook, isn't that about the same as a hollow spirit? Death Heavenly Tao sighed. If that's the case, she might as well become a hollow spirit. At least a hollow spirit is a complete life form. Is there a way to stop it? Audiobook hadn't expected this at all. This girl's presence in the book was already low enough. Now, she was actually forced to make the Heavenly Tao lower its presence. How tragic. Unless you're a Heavenly Tao whitelist user, you can't use resurrection methods without limit. Death Heavenly Tao slowly shook its head and stared at the girl in the medical cabin, whose transparency was gradually decreasing. Also, in order to prevent cheating, the whitelist has a 48-hour review period. That is to say, even if Miss Sun is added to the whitelist now, it's too late. Her body will become completely transparent in the next 48 hours. Saturday, November 28th. It was a plan to destroy the unspeakable land and exterminate the evil Heavenly Tao to save Lotus Sunday. Wang Ling, Golden Lamp and Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal discussed it together and came to an official agreement. The entire plan was divided into 3 parts. First, find the ancient Heavenly Tao lurking on Earth and temporarily block the Yin and Yang death tribulation. Second, complete the upgrade of Earth and train many reliable cultivators to guard Earth. Third, the monk would lead the way, and Wang Ling would break through the unspeakable land together with Wang Ling, thus cutting off the source of the Yin and Yang death tribulation. With the monk handling everything from the outside, Wang Ling just needed to support him from behind. Among the people Wang Ling had come into contact with so far, this was probably the most reliable person in all aspects. But there was something else he didn't understand. He had always thought that the person who had divined Lotus Sun's Yin and Yang death calamity had been the monk himself. However, after careful questioning, the monk said that he had never read the girl's fortune before. Now, the question was, who was that fortune teller from back then? Sunny Yuan was probably the only one who knew about this. Wang Ling wasn't a meddlesome person, but this matter concerned a girl's life. He activated his king's eye and peeked at the appearance of the fortune teller in old man Sun's memory. In the end, the king's eye could only see darkness. He didn't see anything. Did they tamper with it in advance? Wang Ling frowned. His direction had been wrong from the start. Because he had always mistakenly thought that the golden lamp was that fortune teller, he was one step too late. Instead, that mysterious fortune teller had covered up this part of his memory. At that moment, Wang Ling's emotions were exceptionally complicated. As expected, there were crouching tigers and hidden dragons on Earth. It seemed that apart from the monk, there was also a mysterious expert. The other party had actually been able to predict this step and make preparations in advance, which at least proved that this person wasn't weaker than the monk. On the day that Wang Ling and Jin Deng met, the monk was led by Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal to the hospital. When the group of specialists and doctors gathered at the hospital saw the monk, they all had sorrowful expressions on their faces. "AI, it's all my fault. My medical skills weren't good enough, I couldn't save Miss Lotus Sun. It looks like we have to continue learning. Only then can we save more people." The moment the doctors saw the monk, they all looked as if they had been enlightened, and some even huddled together to wipe away their tears. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal didn't understand. "Why are you all so sad? Isn't there still hope for Miss Sun?" One of the doctors was blank for a moment before he asked, "So you didn't bring the monk here to perform a ritual?" Jin Deng and Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, this was a serious occasion, and Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had been specially trained for it. He absolutely wouldn't laugh. Thus, he tried very hard to keep a straight face as he explained Master Jin Deng's background to the many specialists and doctors present. This Zen Master Jin Deng isn't an ordinary person. He might have a way to save Miss Lotus Sunday, a monk. Many of the doctors had doubtful looks on their faces. They were the titans of the medical world, but if even they were helpless, how much ability did a wild monk who had popped up out of nowhere have to save a girl's life? In their view, this was utter nonsense. Senior Immortal, I think this might be a little too hasty. We can understand Mr. Sun's feelings. The first person to object was Director Lu Ping, who felt that it was better to be cautious. The monk had a smile on his face and didn't take the doctor's words to heart at all. He very much understood what everyone was thinking. After all, he had lived in seclusion for so many years, and few people knew his Buddhist name. Without understanding the situation, it was indeed possible to regard him as a swindler. But when all was said and done, Master Jin Dang was Master Jin Dang. The profoundness of a monk's state of mind wasn't something that ordinary people could imagine. Everyone, a monk doesn't lie. Let me show you what I can do first. Jin Dang smiled, then reached out and stroked the shoulder of a male doctor. Benefactor, you suffer from an unmentionable disease in your left shoulder due to constant tiredness. Because of the delay in your work, the disease can't be cured. On rainy days, your left shoulder hurts so much that you can't control it, and it can only be alleviated by dancing at home. Is this penniless monk right? Master. How did you know? The doctor turned pale with shock. Don't panic. I've just blessed your left shoulder, and it's fine now. You don't have to live the life of dancing alone at home at night anymore. Everyone, at that moment, the monk was showing off his superb skills in the hospital's conference room. Everyone began to change their previous attitude, and they began to become enthusiastic. Master. Because of my work, my head has always been very bald. Say no more, benefactor. You've lost your hair while saving the dying and helping the injured. This poor monk will return it to you right away. Master. I always come home late because of my work, and every time I come home late, my wife makes me kneel on durians. Please touch my knees. Benefactor, there's no need to say more. For this poor monk, it's nothing. Master. Because I often stay up late. Well, my wife and I have always wanted a child. Please touch mine. At that moment, the monk glanced indifferently at the doctor's lower body and shook his head. Benefactor, it's not that this poor monk doesn't want to help you. But this matter isn't your problem. Everyone. Chapter 1278. The monk's extraordinary ability to consecrate himself became the focus of the whole hospital for a moment. Seeing that more and more people were coming to him for consecration, Jin Dang smiled slightly and put on his attitude. Benefactors, this humble monk is here to save a life, which requires everyone's full cooperation and unity. Once it's done, anyone who has made a contribution can come to this humble monk's temple to find me. This humble monk has plenty of time to consecrate all of you. After saying that, the monk bowed to the crowd. Thank you, Master. At this point, the people who had been waiting in line for the consecration all understood. It was indeed inappropriate for them to be lining up for the consecration. After all, they had been specially invited here to discuss the girl's condition. The consecration had come to an end for the time being. In the conference room, the monk then turned his gaze to the girl lying quietly in the medical cabin on the screen. He saw that Death Heavenly Dao and Odd Zhuo were standing guard next to her, and with a pinch of his fingers, he understood what had happened. The monk put his palms together and said to grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, Senior Immortal, I'll have to trouble you to organize the scene. I'm going to Miss Sun's ward to take a look. Thank you, Master. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal nodded, not daring to slack off in the slightest. Then, the monk turned around and his entire body turned into an incorporeal shadow. In the next moment, he directly appeared in the ward, which startled Death Heavenly Dao. Who are you? Death Heavenly Dao was especially nervous when someone suddenly burst into the ward. Especially when he saw that it was a monk, he panicked even more. As soon as he saw the monk, he couldn't help associating him with transcendence. Not good. It's an expert. Protect Miss Sun. He almost subconsciously wanted to protect Lotus Sun, and was going to directly attack the monk in front of him. But to Death Heavenly Dao's horror, he found that the spirit power he had just channeled was like a block of ice being roasted at high temperature. It had already completely melted in his palm before it could condense. Death Heavenly Tao immediately thought of a situation, and his expression turned extremely solemn. Who on earth are you? It's been a while since I last saw Mr. Death, so it's normal that you don't remember me. The monk smiled at Death Heavenly Tao. This humble monk was selected to be on the Heavenly Tao White List in 1289. So it's Mr. Golden Lamp. Death Heavenly Tao instantly recalled something that seemed to have happened a long time ago. There were only a handful of users on the Heavenly Axioms White List, and this Zen Master Golden Lamp was the first person in history to enter the White List of the Heavenly Path. Of course, Death Heavenly Tao still had a fresh memory of this. However, due to Zen Master Golden Lamp's continuous reincarnation, his appearance changed in each life. Now that they had met again after countless years, Death Heavenly Tao could no longer recognize Zen Master Golden Lamp's face from his appearance alone. Ling Zhenren asked this poor monk to come, the monk said at that moment. This was an expected answer, and neither Death Heavenly Tao nor Odd Zhuo were too surprised. Previously, Death Heavenly Tao had heard that Wang Ling had personally tried to ask for help from an expert. But he didn't expect that this expert was actually Jin Deng. The monk smiled. A few hours ago, this poor monk fought with Ling Zhenren, and then decided to help him deal with this matter. Death Heavenly Tao said, I see. Tyrant scratched his head. Aren't you going to ask about the outcome of the duel? Death Heavenly Tao, in any case, it's definitely Mr. Golden Lamp who will be beaten up. He had wanted to save face for the monk, which was why he had deliberately not mentioned this matter. But who would have thought that this monk was so big-hearted that he didn't care about face at all? AI, why is it that even you can see the outcome clearly, but this poor monk is actually so arrogant? The monk sighed sincerely at Death Heavenly Tao's words. He didn't regret challenging Wang Ling. He just felt that his blind confidence had been a little stupid. Seeing the monk's melancholy, Death Heavenly Tao could only comfort him. The onlooker sees the game more clearly than the onlooker. Master, there's no need to take it to heart, the monk was tired. But he hadn't forgotten his mission. He had come here for official business. This yin and yang death tribulation was caused by the ancient golden men who escaped, and the source of the death tribulation is that unspeakable place. Said the monk. Unspeakable place. Death Heavenly Tao's pupils shook violently at this term. To the new generation of Heavenly Tao, this was a familiar yet unfamiliar term. The number of Heavenly Tao golden men who knew about this was even fewer. Apart from the 6 main Heavenly Taos who still had some residual memories, the other Heavenly Taos had almost forgotten about this place. It looks like you've remembered. Who would have thought that Tao ancestors' benevolence back then would become today's hidden danger? After all, the palm and the back of the hand are both flesh and blood. You can say that Tao ancestor is a benevolent person. But based on this poor monk's understanding of Tao ancestor, there must be a deeper meaning behind this. At that moment, the monk turned to the girl and took out a magic treasure from the sleeve of his kasaya. His sleeve was like a dimensional pocket, also known as the universe in the sleeve, which contained all the magic treasures he had collected since his 3,910 lives. This was a huge treasure trove. What's this? Death Heavenly Tao asked as he stared at the golden flower the golden lamp had taken out. This is the Buddha golden lotus. It's specially used to seal souls. Miss Sun's soul has been affected by the death tribulation and will leave her body from time to time. It's better to store her soul in the golden lotus, said the monk. The Buddha golden lotus was a divine object. It was comparable to a heavenly Tao magic treasure. It contained the monk's cultivation of 100 lives. The monk had originally intended to use it for himself. With this golden lotus in hand, he could prevent all kinds of accidents. But now, he wanted to join hands with Wang Ling to explore the mysteries of the unspeakable land. It was a place he had never been able to enter even after spending 1,000 lives. The monk felt that exchanging 100 lives worth of cultivation for a ticket to the unspeakable land was a very good deal. After entering the Buddha golden lotus, the girl's soul would be temporarily sealed in the golden lotus. It could temporarily avoid the effects of the yin and yang death tribulation. However, once the Buddha golden lotus absorbed this cursed soul, the spirit energy sealed inside would start to run out. 100 lives worth of cultivation could only be exchanged for 100 days at most. Thus, they had to solve the problem of the unspeakable land within 100 days. The monk was a little worried. He didn't know if they could make it in time. What about the body? Without the soul, it will rot. Audiobook asked at that moment. That's easy. At that moment, Jean Deng opened the medical cabin and reached out to touch the girl's forehead. Then, a ray of golden light entered the girl's body. She's fine, I've blessed her. Master, what should we do next? Someone must guard Miss Sun's body day and night. Next, this poor monk will personally invite Star Lord of Divine Tao Star. If we want to upgrade Earth, we'll need Divine Tao Star's help, said Jean Deng. After saying that, he handed the Buddha golden lotus to Death Heavenly Tao and took another step forward. The monk's magic was unimaginably profound. In the next moment, he shrank the ground to an inch and traversed countless light years in one step to arrive on Divine Tao Star. Chapter 1279. When the monk appeared on Divine Tao Star, Star Lord was receiving treatment. Yes, psychotherapy. This was the aftereffect of his last fight with Wang Ling. Divine Tao Star had originally relied on devouring other planets to forcibly absorb alien civilizations into its star core to expand in the universe. Unfortunately, Star Lord's plan was ultimately completely dispelled by Wang Ling. As an academician of the Magical Treasure Academy of Sciences and one of Dopigua's uncles, Guoping also served as an ambassador for the establishment of diplomatic relations. Responsible for the peaceful establishment of diplomatic relations between Earth and Divine Tao Star. Although it was called a peaceful diplomatic relationship, Divine Tao Star was in fact unilaterally assisting Earth by providing it with more alien technology. He had been a grand alien overlord back then, but now, in order to survive, he had been forced to become a wholesale boss of alien black technology. Star Lord's Tao heart collapsed at this kind of disparity, now that the monk had directly appeared in front of Star Lord, who was undergoing psychotherapy. He was so scared that he almost fainted. Tyrant couldn't help but sigh at this scene. In the end, this was still caused by his insufficient cultivation. He had also been beaten by Wang Ling. Although the monk reflected on himself after being beaten up, it wasn't to the extent of being autistic. The greatest benefit of being able to fight against a strong opponent was the post-battle summary. The stronger the opponent, the more one would discover their own shortcomings. If he kept staring at his failure, it was only natural that his Tao heart would collapse. The monk had also heard about Wang Ling's previous battle on Divine Tao Star. It was just that he hadn't expected Star Lord's heart to be so fragile. How long has he been like this? Jean Deng looked at the dispirited and listless Star Lord who had fainted, and asked a little girl with natural curls next to him. He used his remaining xian to see through the little girl's true form. She was an 8-winged god. The throne that the divine realm had originally used to guide Star Lord had been split in half by Jingbai, so they had sent a cute 8-winged god to assist Star Lord in his work. Tyrant sighed in his heart. With such a lovely girl accompanying him day and night, what was there to shut himself up about? He had always wanted to take a female monk as his disciple. He's been like this for a long time. Ever since he lost, he's been getting worse day by day. I've been counseling him every day, but it's useless. The girl with natural curls sighed. What kind of tutoring do you do? The monk was curious. It means repeatedly showing him the video of himself getting beaten up. This is called aversion therapy. The monk was horrified. The girl with the natural scroll looked very cute, but she was clearly not an ordinary person. Were you sent by Ling Zhenren? 8-winged god, who had transformed into a girl with natural curls, suddenly asked with big eyes. She was wearing a snow-white robe, and her whole body exuded an immortal aura. Using the words of the young people on Earth to label her, she was like a little angel. As expected of a character sent by the Shinto. The monk nodded and performed a Buddhist salute to the girl with natural curls. He could tell that the girl with natural curls was not an ordinary person. At the very least, he had an important position in the god realm. Moreover, the wings behind the girl's back had yet to fully grow. In the immortal world, strength was determined by the number of wings one had. There were 100-winged gods and even 1,000-winged gods. But this 1,000-winged god wasn't even enough for the sword spirit under Wang Ling's command to slash at it once. As for the girl in front of him, through the swastika, the monk saw tens of thousands of pairs of wings. In an instant, Tyrant had a rough idea of the girl's identity. He turned to the girl and smiled. I never thought that this poor monk would be able to meet your Majesty Kai on this trip. I'm really very lucky. The girl pursed her lips and wrinkled her pretty crescent eyebrows. You saw through me at one glance. You're no ordinary monk. When experts exchanged blows, nothing could be more fatal than this. This was the monk and the world king of the god realm meeting for the first time, but they had already figured out each other's identities and intentions. It seems that your Majesty Kai already knows why this poor monk has come. The monk put his palms together in a Buddhist salute. A string of prayer beads hung between his thumb and index finger on his right hand, and each bead emitted powerful spirit power. Don't call me your Majesty Kai, it's so distant. How about I call you monk and you call me Awan? The girl with natural curls was unexpectedly approachable, and he was pleasantly surprised. Then this poor monk will respectfully accept your invitation, Miss Awan. The monk smiled. Awan nodded. It will take a lot of work to upgrade the earth. Also, many other factors have to be taken into account. Back then, after Tao Father Wang established the heavenly Tao, he established the divine realm. In fact, the current cultivation culture on earth also originated from the divine realm. However, most of the cultivators on earth are unaware of the existence of the god's domain. I know. The monk nodded. Therefore, once the earth completes its upgrade, with the accumulation of time, the earth will become a planet. The cultivation civilization on earth will eventually merge with the divine domain. It would no longer be a subservient relationship. This matter will also implicate the interests of many large families in God's domain. Miss Awan is right. The monk completely agreed with the girl's opinion. However, regarding the matter of the merger, he also had his own opinions and views. Civilizations in the divine territory and Earth share the same origin. Even if there was a temporary difference, the merger would be completed sooner or later. In this penniless monk's opinion, this is the best opportunity. Regarding this matter, both the monk and the young girl were well aware of it. Once the seal on the unspeakable land's ancient gold men was lifted, it would be a huge blow to the entire cultivation civilization. At that time, it wouldn't just be Earth that would suffer, even the divine realm would be implicated. Thus, the divine realm would have to get involved sooner or later. As for the interests of the large families in the divine realm, this was actually very easy to resolve. If you weren't convinced, then we could discuss it. The children of the large families in the divine realm were now studying at number 60 high school. Furthermore, with Gu Xuanji, the enforcer of heavenly Tao, on their side, the outcome could be decided through a vote. If they didn't want to discuss it and wanted to resolve it by force, the monk felt that it would be even easier. When the time came, they could directly hold a competition in the divine realm, and call it the first god's domain beating competition. Who could withstand 10 palms? This matter could be discussed again. At that moment, the girl with natural curls raised her eyebrows. Of course, if Ling Zhenren decides to ask me for help, I won't refuse. But before that, I have a request. Does Miss Awan's request have to do with Star-Lord? The monk guessed. There are a lot of procedures involved in upgrading the earth. I can't be the only one in charge of everything. I need someone to help me. The girl said. This poor monk understands. The monk nodded slightly when he heard this. Star-Lord of Divine Tao Star looked like a Star-Lord, but the entire Divine Tao Star was in fact an expansion of the Divine Realm. This was similar to the relationship between the Divine Realm and Earth. The so-called Star-Lord of Divine Tao Star was in fact more like a servant of the gods. The Divine Realm was imitating Tao ancestor Wang's actions back then. They wanted to use this method of expanding the planet to make their own civilization flourish. Since that's the case, this poor monk will be so bold as to give it a try. The monk stared at the unconscious Star-Lord and smiled helplessly. I knew you would have a way, monk." The girl with natural curls clapped on the side. "There was no other way. Open the light." The monk placed his hand on Star-Lord's heart. The light of the soul was also within the range of the spell. But monks usually didn't use it on people. That was because the effect of the light of the soul was too strong, and it was easy to have side effects. The advantages were obvious, but there were also disadvantages. The advantage was that it could make people suddenly see the light and discard distracting thoughts. The disadvantage was that it would enter Sage mode for a short period of time. Earth cultivators' Sage mode usually went like this: clear all their cloud disks, format the data on their hard drives, and delete all their seed files. For some fat shut-ins, this kind of soul opening was a little too cruel. But let's be honest. After clearing the cloud disk's hard drive, it was true that the body could get better, comical. Chapter 1280. Regarding the after-effects of soul enlightenment, Tyrant had seen a lot from the cultivators on Earth. Divine Tao Star's Star-Lord belonged to the Divine Dragon clan. From an Earthling's perspective, this was an alien creature, who knew what kind of problems would arise. Tyrant had always been worried about this situation. A few minutes later, this Star-Lord woke up after the spiritual illumination spell was completed. "What's wrong with me?" Star-Lord opened his eyes, revealing his divine dragon race's unique dark red vertical centipede. Compared with his previous dispirited and listless state, Star-Lord's complexion was clearly much better. The girl with curly hair clapped even harder. "Wow! A monk. You're so powerful. I've shown him so many videos, but he's still not cured. You can just touch him with your hands. Miss Awan, you flatter me. It's just a small trick." The monk smiled bitterly and shook his head. "However, I have to remind Miss Awan that since she has recovered, she shouldn't show her the video anymore." Everyone had a different level of acceptance. The monk was mainly worried that Divine Tao Star's Star-Lord would shut himself off again after watching the video. "Nah. A monk. Can you touch me too?" The young girl's eyes were like stars, and an envious expression appeared on her face. "Miss Awan is healthy. My touch won't have any effect." The monk smiled awkwardly. "Does that mean that as long as it's broken somewhere, it'll be fine?" the girl asked. "Yes. It doesn't matter if it's a person or an object," the monk answered truthfully. After all, the other party was a realm king of the divine world. Tyrant still maintained a certain degree of etiquette, not daring to cross the line in the slightest. Although he had the thought of taking the female monk as his disciple the first time he saw the girl, he was not able to do so. However, when he found out the origin of the girl with natural curls, he completely dispelled this thought. It was obvious that he wouldn't allow a god world king to be his disciple. "Then one of my things is broken. Monk, can you cultivate it?" At this time, the young girl, who wanted to see the monk's magical light illumination technique again, asked with hope. "What is it?" Jin Deng raised his eyebrows and asked. "Shroud," the girl replied at lightning speed. "M.O." Tyrant held his forehead. The horror in his heart was like a stormy sea. He never thought that the legendary realm king of the god world would be so open and bold. For a moment, the monk's thoughts were in a mess. He didn't know how to answer the girl's question. "Is this very difficult to fix?" Miss Awan frowned when she saw the monk's troubled expression. The monk fell into silence. He originally wanted to be blunt. After all, when one reached a certain age, they would eventually be broken. However, he also felt that it would be too straightforward to say it out loud. As a monk, he should be more reserved. However, the next moment, the girl took out her phone. "Look, my phone's membrane is cracked." "Oh, so it's a cell phone membrane." The monk was suddenly enlightened and heaved a long sigh of relief. He then started to reflect on himself. As a proper monk who had achieved the Tao, why did he always think of some strange knowledge? He chanted Ba a dozen times in his heart. Then, he reached out and caressed the girl's phone. The membrane was blessed and restored to its original state. Moreover, its hardness was several levels higher than before. It could even be used to block powerful attacks. "Thank you, monk." Miss Awan thanked him, then patted Star-Lord on the back. "And you? Hurry up and thank Master." "Thank you, Master." Star-Lord was blank for a moment, then hurriedly thanked him. "You shouldn't be afraid of Ling Jinren now, right?" The monk asked to confirm that there were no side effects from the spiritual blessing spell. Judging from the results so far, everything seemed normal on the surface. But in the next moment, Star-Lord opened his dragon claws. "Thank you, Master. I'm not afraid at all now. I even feel like I can slap Ling Jinren to death." Golden Lamp and Miss Awan, "Monk, why is it like this?" Miss Awan asked worriedly. She felt that this blessing had been a little too forceful. "It's fine, the side effect is probably overconfidence. I hope Miss Awan can keep an eye on him. If he's slapped to death by Ling Jinren, this poor monk won't be able to save him even with the spiritual blessing spell." On the other side, Audjua held the Buddha golden lotus in his hands as he gazed at the girl's soul sealed inside. He felt like he was holding a full-body 3D projection of a small person. When the monk had led Lotus Sun into the golden lotus, her soul had still been asleep. But now, it was already showing signs of waking up. "Senior Joie." After the girl's soul woke up, she had an astonished expression on her face, separated by the Buddha golden lotus. "Wait." This line sounded a little familiar. Fortunately, Audjua was already prepared. He took out his phone, opened the Q&A document that he had typed earlier, and then clicked on the artificial voice recognition playback function. Roughly 10 minutes later, all the questions had been answered, and the girl finally had a better understanding of her current situation. "So, I can still be saved now." Lotus Sun smiled. Audjua sighed inwardly at Lotus Sun's big heart. She was actually able to maintain such an optimistic attitude at a time like this. "Thank you for telling me this, Senior Joie. I'll keep classmate Wang Ling's matter a secret," Lotus Sun promised. Actually." Audjua was a little embarrassed. "Actually, I shouldn't have told you this. Shifu has always kept a low profile." Junior sister Lotus Sun, you'll actually forget everything I'm telling you now once your soul returns to your body. After thinking it over, Audjua decided to tell the girl this cruel truth. He didn't want to deceive her. "I understand, Senior Joie." Lotus Sun nodded. "But I'll try my best not to forget." "Then do your best, Junior sister Lotus Sun." Audjua replied with a polite smile. In his opinion, it was almost impossible for her to retain her memories after returning to her body. "Well, Senior Joie, can you do me a favor?" the girl suddenly asked at that moment. "Junior sister Lotus Sun, go ahead." Audjua nodded. "It's like this, Senior Joie. I've always wanted to see what the outside world thinks of me while I'm lying in bed," Lotus Sun said. She had always been the eldest daughter of Huagua Water Curtain Group, and everyone around her treated her with the utmost respect. Lotus Sun found this unreal. After the incident of the Yin and Yang death tribulation this time, for the girl, this might be a good plan to hear the truth from the bottom of her heart. "Junior sister Lotus Sun, are you sure? Reality might be a lot crueler." There were many different opinions on this matter in the outside world. Audjua felt that if he agreed to this request, it might hurt Lotus Sunday. "I just want to hear the truth." Lotus Sun kept smiling gracefully. "Also, didn't Senior Joie say that once I return to my body, I'll forget everything? So even if I hear some bad comments, it shouldn't matter, right?" Audjua was silent. After a while, he said, "Go ahead, Junior sister Lotus Sunday, whatever you want to do, I'll cooperate fully." Chapter 1281. Following Lotus Sun's instructions, Audjua and Death Heavenly Tao started to prepare for the great sacrifice spell. He had specially used this spell on Daoist Guang before. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had used it to burn a lot of things. But now, Daoist Guang was still addicted to being an online live streamer in his independent soul space. For a previous story, see Chapter 411, Eat More Chicken, You Can Too. Over at the hospital, Death Heavenly Tao summoned a few Heavenly Tao little golden men to watch over the body. Together, he and Audiobook went to the luxurious villa where the girl lived. When Audiobook drove up to the entrance, he saw several maids sorting out the gifts piled on the ground. These gifts were beautifully wrapped. There were more than 100 of them, and they were stacked high like a small mountain. Hello. Holding the golden lotus, Audiobook took the initiative to ask about the situation. The head maid put her broom aside and tried to keep a smile on her face. Well, Miss is now in the hospital and is still being treated. Thank you for taking the time to send these gifts. Just put them on the ground, and we'll pass on your kindness. We don't receive guests at the moment. It was obvious that the head maid was also quite helpless about the current situation. In the last 2 days, they had received more than 100 gifts of various sizes. Everyone who came would ask a few questions, confirm the situation, put down the gifts, and then slip away. The head maid had already said this hundreds of times in the last 2 days, and could almost recite it backwards. Audiobook sighed inwardly at the head maid's professionalism. No matter how busy and tired she was, she wouldn't show her emotions directly on her face in front of outsiders. This is Auntie Chio, the head maid who has always taken good care of me, the girl in the Buddha Golden Lotus said at that moment. Death Heavenly Tao had already set up an independent mental chat channel, so Audiobook and Death Heavenly Tao could hear everything Lotus Sun said. Auntie Chio had always been the head maid who put the big picture first. She was simple, honest, kind, and warm and polite. Hiding in the Golden Lotus, Lotus Sun watched everything. The head maid's performance didn't disappoint her. You must be Auntie Chio. Audiobook smiled. You are? Auntie Chio was stunned. Not many people knew her name, unless they were members of the family. But Audiobook didn't look familiar to her and didn't look like someone from the family. However, the more she looked at his face, the more familiar it seemed to Auntie Chio. I remember now, you're that hairy legs shoulder carrier on TV. Audiobook? Lotus Sun, it seems that the first time Auntie Chio met Senior Zhuo was at the Spirit Sword Exchange meet reported by a local TV station, and it seems that's the only thing she remembers. He felt very wronged. He had obviously shouldered so many earth-shattering scapegoats. In the end, there was only one person who remembered the humiliation he made on the day of the Spiritual Sword Exchange meet. Hello, Auntie Chio. I'm Audiobook. Right. I remember now. Auntie Chio smiled brightly. You're Miss Lotus Sun Senior, right? When I heard Miss talk about the school, the person she mentioned the second most was you. What about the first one? A classmate called Wang Ling, Audiobook. As expected of Shifu. Auntie Chio, I wonder why Mr. Zhua is here this time. It's like this, Old Man Sun has entrusted us with bringing some of Miss Lotus Sun's clothes and some daily necessities. Audiobook followed Lotus Sun's instructions and showed her his work ID. This Mr. Wang next to me is a staff member. Oh, so that's how it is. Auntie Chio nodded. Please follow me, I'll show you to Miss Sun's room. After saying that, the old auntie instructed the maids at the door, you lot, tidy up the gifts at the door and send them to the warehouse. I'll come over later to take inventory. Yes. The maids answered one after another. They then lowered their heads and busied themselves with the work at hand. As they passed by the huge garden fountain in the atrium, Audiobook couldn't help asking, who are the people at the door delivering gifts? Are they familiar with junior sister Lotus Sun? Not really. Auntie Chio shook her head. Yes, some of our group's business partners, and some are here to inquire about information. Inquire about information? Mrs. Serious illness will definitely have an impact on the stock. These capitalists are here to find out the truth. Auntie Chio frowned and said, we are one of the world's largest elixir companies, and have developed countless life-saving elixirs. If even young Master's life can't be saved, the impact will be huge. Of course, Master dotes on Miss very much. He doesn't care about the stock, but other people do. Then what about these gifts? Put them in the warehouse first, and then find a chance to return them all later, Auntie Cho said. She led Odd Joe forward. The Sun family's villa was astonishingly big. Odd Joe felt like he had walked for several minutes before he reached the entrance. When they arrived at the magnificent main hall, Auntie Cho fetched the remote control and started to operate the elevator in the center. This is a transmission array. We can save some time, Auntie Cho said. Odd Joe sighed in his heart. In the end, this was the world of the rich. He didn't understand. There was actually a transmission array in the house. It was only later that Odd Joe learned that such a transmission array could be found in every corner of the Sun family's villa. On the one hand, it was convenient for people to walk around, and on the other, it could effectively prevent visitors from randomly touring the villa and seeing things they shouldn't see. Lotus Sun's room was on the south side of the villa, and there was a very grand reception room in the middle. The transmission array wasn't direct, and required a second transmission. When Odd Joe and the others were teleported to the living room, he heard a ruckus in it. You're not allowed in the hospital. You people are usually so close to little sister Lotus Sun, but you don't know? Why don't I believe it? A young man with a tall nose was sitting cross-legged on the sofa in the reception room. In front of him stood a row of 6 maids. The young man's attitude was arrogant, and he exuded the aura of a hedonistic young master. He was dressed quite decently, but Odd Joe had seen too many people, so he could tell from the way he talked what kind of person he was. But Odd Joe didn't poke his nose into other people's business. For someone to be able to enter the reception room at this critical juncture, it was obvious that they had to have something to do with Lotus Sunday. They had to be someone from the family. Seeing that the maids were lowering their heads and refusing to speak, the young man put on a pained expression. I know that Auntie Cho told you not to leak any information, and you're in a difficult position. But you should also know that I'm little sister Lotus Sun's cousin. Blood is thicker than water. Is there a problem with me knowing a little about my sister's current situation? Saying this, the young man snapped his fingers, and a bodyguard in black next to him put a huge black suitcase on the coffee table. I, Fan Xing, am not a stingy person. The money in the suitcase will be a bonus for anyone who answers my questions today. But if you don't want to talk, you'll have to bear the consequences. Mr. Joa, Mr. Wang, I'm sorry for making you laugh. The juniors of this family don't know any better, so it's troublesome. In front of the reception room, Auntie Cho turned to apologize to Odd Joe and the others. If it had been an outsider causing trouble, it would have been easy for her to deal with it. She could have directly taken action. But this Fan Xing was someone from the family. Auntie Cho still had to treat him with courtesy. In order to get information on Lotus Sun, Fan Xing had already stayed here for 2 whole days. Now that she heard Fan Xing threaten her maid with her own ears, Auntie Cho finally couldn't take it anymore. But she still maintained a very professional smile and walked forward with a kind expression on her face. Young Master Fan, I remember saying it very clearly. Young Miss is safe and sound in the hospital. You don't have to worry about her. Is that so? Fan Xing smiled. But why do I hear that she's not going to make it? Auntie Cho was already taking deep breaths. Young Master Fan, please don't listen to unconfirmed news. What a pity. Fan Xing shrugged. Before she fell ill, little sister Lotus Sun and I were engaged to each other. Now that she's sick, if she doesn't wake up, who am I going to talk to about it? I can give up, but I'll have to trouble old man Sun to come out and talk about compensation. I'm a boy who is easily hurt mentally and physically. Auntie Cho suppressed her anger. Young Master Fan, what good will it do you to ruin young Miss's reputation? Fan Xing chuckled. Auntie Cho, do you think you know little sister Lotus Sun very well? I have a lot of exclusive news about little sister Lotus Sun here. In the Golden Buddha Lotus, when the girl saw who it was, her head also swelled. Lotus Sun, I knew he would come to cause trouble. In the spiritual space, she communicated with Odd Joe and Death Heavenly Tao. Odd Joe, doesn't junior sister Lotus Sun like this person? Lotus Sun, he used to be one of my pursuers, Audra was shocked. Isn't that your cousin? Lotus Sun dropped her forehead into her hand, feeling a headache coming on. He said that he's already had his blood changed all over his body. He has excellent genes from head to toe, and doesn't have the slightest bit of orthopedic in him. What a disgusting person. Audra secretly snorted, then asked Death Heavenly Tao, Senior, can you take a look at this person's age? He'll be sent to the hospital very soon. At that moment, Death Heavenly Tao stared at the young man on the sofa. For some reason, Fan Xing suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Senior, what do you plan to do? Audra asked in the spiritual space. Have you seen a movie? What movie? Final Destination. Death Heavenly Tao snorted. Chapter 1282. A chill ran down his spine straight to his soul, giving Fan Xing goosebumps all over his body. But he still hadn't given up on the idea of gathering information. Although there were currently rumors that Lotus Sun was critically ill, this was a serious matter, and the young man couldn't just listen to one side of the story. That was why he had come to the villa where Lotus Sun lived to find out the truth. In his heart, he earnestly hoped that Lotus Sun was dead. As long as he could confirm her death, he could immediately have the company's stockbrokers accurately cash out in the stock market. If he acted now, it would actually be risky. The young man didn't have a lot of savings, and he wanted to do something big this time and invest all his money. Hence, he needed to act steadily. For the past 2 days, he had been staying overnight and causing trouble here, using all kinds of shameless methods to try to provoke the head maid and the other maids here so that he could get the truth out of them. However, everyone here was tight-lipped, and no matter what he asked, they wouldn't say half a word. This made Fan Xing feel a little uncomfortable. At that moment, Fan Xing turned his gaze to Audra, who was standing next to Auntie Chiu. He knew that Audra was Lotus Sun's senior, and the two of them had to be related. Furthermore, Audra was wearing a special Huagua Water Curtain Group employee ID. This allowed Fan Xing to see new hope. Maybe Audra knew something. Obviously, the young man didn't realize that he was courting death. Isn't this Director Zhua? Fan Xing said with a slightly contemptuous expression. I wonder what an outsider like Director Zhua is doing at my little sister Lotus Sun's place. My sister and I have already pledged to marry each other. Isn't it a little late for you to come fawn over her? The corners of Audjua's mouth twitched violently. It wasn't just Auntie Chiu, even he couldn't help himself. But Senior Death Heavenly Tao had already taken action, so he just needed to be patient and watch the show. Fan Xing felt a little uncomfortable under the gaze of this young man in overalls. He didn't know why, but when he looked at this young man, he felt a bone-piercing chill. Thus, Fan Xing frowned again and said, in any case, Director Zhua is my junior sister Lotus Sun Senior. Where did this guru come from? Death Heavenly Tao, Fan Xing, what are you looking at? So what if you have big eyes? What was the point of glaring at him? If you have the ability, stare me to death. An outsider like you has no right to cause trouble in my younger sister's house. As soon as he finished speaking, Fan Xing felt his body getting colder and colder for some reason. He snorted and stood up from the sofa. He glanced at the maids and said, I seem to have caught a cold. I'm going back to my room. Hurry up and make me a bowl of ginger soup and a typhoid recovery pill. Otherwise, don't even think about getting tips. After that, the young man left arrogantly with a few bodyguards dressed in black who accompanied him. Senior, you're not going to make a move. Audra couldn't take it anymore. Death Heavenly Tao's voice was cold. The countdown has already started. In less than 24 hours, he'll definitely be sent to the hospital. Previously, Death Heavenly Tao had indeed had the urge to glare at Fan Xing to death. His eyes were the Heavenly Tao's stare of death's demon eye. As long as he used his soul force and stared at a person for more than 10 seconds, that person would immediately die. But due to Fan Xing continuing to provoke unceasingly, this made Death Heavenly Tao change its mind. It would be too easy for him to just glare him to death. Half dead was the greatest torture. In the spiritual space, Lotus Sun asked curiously, "Senior, what will happen to my cousin?" "Death Heavenly Tao, don't worry, Miss Sunday. He won't die, but his life is over." Lotus Sun sighed. "I didn't expect him to be so vicious." After Fan Xing left, Auntie Chiu naturally apologized. Fan Xing hadn't left for the past 2 days, which was giving her quite a headache. "Auntie Chiu, I've made a fool of myself. It's my fault, I shouldn't have let him in." "It's alright, Auntie Chiu. This kind of person will naturally get what he deserves," Audiobook said with a smile. Elsewhere, Fan Xing, who had returned to his room, felt uneasy all over. For some reason, it was getting colder and colder. Lying on the bed in the guest room, his body went limp and he felt like he had lost all his strength. "Oh no, young master seems to have a fever. Get the private doctor in the villa to come and take a look." "That won't do, I already asked around. This private doctor has also been transferred to the hospital for a meeting." The bodyguards who had come along were discussing this. "Cut the crap. If you have the time, hurry up and tell those maids to hurry up," Fan Xing shouted in a low voice. Hearing this, the bodyguards left the room one after another. At that moment, Fan Xing was the only one left in the room. Murderous intent quietly descended, his head rested on the pillow. For some reason, Fan Xing felt that the pillow seemed especially soft today. He closed his eyes and rested for a while. But it wasn't long before the young man started to feel stuffy and hot. He could feel his breathing becoming labored. In a split second, like a salted fish struggling on its deathbed, Fan Xing abruptly jumped up from the bed. What's going on?" Then he was astonished to find that, at some point, there was a big hole in the pillow. The cotton wadding that had spilled out had all flowed into his nostrils and mouth. Bah bah bah, ugh, he did his best to dig out the foreign matter from his mouth and nose. Kneeling on the ground, Fan Xing stared at the cotton wadding that was soaked with his saliva and snot as he dug it out of his mouth and nose. The strange scene in front of him terrified him. He realized that he couldn't stay in the room alone any longer. Someone come quickly," he yelled. However, there wasn't the slightest movement outside the guest room. The bodyguards were all chased away by him. They went to urge the maids to prepare the medicinal soup. Not a single person stayed behind to watch over him, damn it. Fan Xing gritted his teeth, pounced on the door, and angrily turned the handle on the door. Then there was a cracking sound. The entire handle was twisted off by him. Fan Xing. However, before the young man could react to how he could twist off the door handle of the bedroom so easily, at this moment, one of the screws on the door suddenly fell and rolled to the young man's feet. Fan Xing was in a daze and didn't notice the situation under his feet at all. He stepped on the screw with his bare feet. A sharp pain came instantly. It penetrated his whole body. In the midst of a scream, the young man lost his balance. As he stumbled, he saw that he was about to hit the edge of the bed. Fan Xing used the last of his strength to instill psionic power into the top of his head. He strengthened the hardness of his head. The next moment, his iron head hit the edge of the bed. The huge impact caused the entire bed to be lifted up. It completed a perfect 360-degree Thomas full rotation in the air and then fell heavily on the lower half of his body. "Young master. The medicine is here." The bodyguard had already rushed back with the medicine in his hand. Hearing the movement inside the door, he hurriedly kicked the door open and entered. "Young master, what's wrong with you?" The bedroom door was kicked away like a spinning guillotine and directly hit Fan Xing's head. In an instant, the bedroom was filled with blood. Chapter 1283. Half an hour later, the ambulance arrived at the Sun family's villa. When the emergency doctor arrived, Fan Xing was still pinned under the bed. "Why didn't you pull your young master out? What if he strained himself?" The bodyguards looked at each other. They didn't dare move for no other reason than they were afraid of causing a second injury to their young master. Pulling him out would at most cause another fracture. In this situation, the bedside is directly pressing against his spine. The emergency doctor didn't dare continue. Judging from his personal experience, even if Fan Xing was eventually rescued, he would probably be left paralyzed. But considering Fan Xing's relationship with Huaguo Water Curtain Group, if Huaguo Water Curtain Group was willing to provide some high-quality pills for body recovery, he would be able to walk, but he wasn't sure about anything else. With current cultivation medical technology, physical damage and bone fractures weren't a big deal for cultivators. What they were most afraid of was nerve damage. Even if Fan Xing could be rescued and regain his ability to walk, he would still be a cripple. He might even have problems with his balance. Not to mention flying on a sword, even running would be a problem. After a simple appraisal and bandaging, the emergency doctor directed the people at the scene to dig out Fan Xing, who had been pinned under the bed for a long time, and carried him onto a stretcher. "Doctor, what happened to my young master?" "I wanted to ask you what happened. Why did the room look like a car accident even though he was asleep?" The bodyguard looked aggrieved. "It seems like the doorknob was spinning, and a nail fell. Young master didn't pay attention and stepped on the nail. He lost his balance due to the pain and crashed into the bed, causing the entire bed to flip." "What about the door?" the doctor questioned. "I accidentally stabbed him when I kicked the door open to save him," the bodyguard said. The emergency doctor sighed, then made a preliminary appraisal of Fan Xing's injuries. Comminuted skull fracture, brain juice and blood seeping out of the crack. The soles of his feet were pierced by a mystic iron nail. He might have tetanus. Pressure on his spine, causing intermittent shock. He fell to the floor, which is made of top-grade mystic stone and is extremely hard, causing your young master's knees to shatter. At the same time, a rib pierced through his chest after the fracture and inexplicably stabbed into his lower body pouch. What pouch? He's a man after all. What other pouch could he have? When the emergency doctor said this, he couldn't help but feel sad. A single rib could skewer the things in the bag like a mutton kebab. He had never seen such a magical operation. Of course, this was not the end. The strangest thing is that there is cotton wool in his oral cavity. I just took a brief look with the scanning magical equipment. Some of the cotton wool is blocked in his lungs and stomach. He needs to be operated on as soon as possible. Then can my young master still be saved? The bodyguards were shocked and turned pale. Now that Fan Xing was in such a big trouble, they might not be able to keep their jobs. This is also the strangest thing to me. The emergency doctor glanced at Fan Xing on the stretcher. None of these injuries could be considered fatal, but when stacked together, it was enough to take a person's life. But the strangest thing was that Fan Xing was still breathing. He was still stubbornly living on. Earlier, when the ambulance arrived at the Sun family's villa, the emergency doctor already had a bad feeling in his heart. Because of the long distance, it took them a lot of time to get here. According to the bodyguard's description, Fan Xing's injuries seemed to be very serious, and there was probably no hope of treatment. Who knew that Fan Xing would actually still be breathing despite such serious injuries? It seems that everything is the will of the heavens. At that moment, the emergency doctor stared at Fan Xing and sighed in his heart. He felt that Fan Xing was really lucky. If it wasn't for the blessings of the heavens, how could this person still be alive? Fan Xing had died very peacefully. He had been sent out of the Sun family's villa on a stretcher. The bodyguards who had been accompanying him followed him in tears, as if they were at a funeral. Watching this scene from a distance in Lotus Sun's room, Audiobook felt that Fan Xing really was dead. Senior Death Heavenly Tao, is he really still alive? Audiobook looked incredulous. Actually, compared with killing a person, I'm actually better at suppressing the bloodline. It's to keep people in a half-dead state. Death Heavenly Tao said, there used to be an old saying, the wicked will be dealt with by the heavens. That's actually true. For these wicked people, I often come up with ways to suppress their bloodline so that they die a painful death, and they usually choose to commit suicide in the end. Lotus Sun and Audiobook, junior sister Lotus Sun, what do we do next? Lotus Sun, it's very simple. I'll have to trouble Senior Joie to tidy up the things in my room. Then find a secluded place to burn them for me. Odd Joie, burn them all? Lotus Sun thought carefully. Yes. There are two things that can't be burned. What is it? Keep my wardrobe and desk for now. It wasn't that the girl couldn't bear to part with them, but that there were some of her private clothes in the wardrobe. If she took them out in broad daylight and burned them, it seemed a little inappropriate. As for the desk, leaving the textbooks inside was secondary. It was just that the girl remembered the copybook that she had secretly hidden earlier. Wang Ling's handwriting was very beautiful. She had always been secretly imitating it. Odd Joie was Wang Ling's disciple. If Senior Joie saw him imitating Wang Ling's copybook, how embarrassing would that be? What about the other things? Burn them all, we'll buy them again. All right, Odd Joie smiled bitterly. In the end, this was the thinking of the rich. He used the great sacrificial art in tandem with the heavenly Tao of death. Except for the two things that Lotus Sun had specified that he hadn't burned, he burned almost everything in the girl's room. This was equivalent to moving Lotus Sun's room into the space inside the Buddha Golden Lotus. Should I burn the Wi-Fi? Odd Joie asked. There's no need, Senior Joie. We can get an internet signal here, Lotus Sun replied. Odd Joie was blank at first. But on second thought, it wasn't that strange. This Buddha Golden Lotus was something that Tyrant kept for his own protection. Perhaps the monk had also thought about surfing the internet in the soul space. In this day and age, everything was fine. Even if you lost your life, you couldn't be disconnected from the internet. Therefore, this Buddha space also came with its own private Wi-Fi that Golden Lamp had personally set up. As long as one was in the space of the Buddha Golden Lotus, they would be able to connect automatically. After recovering her internet access, she logged into her account. Because she was the president of the student union, she was the leader of number 60 High's campus group chat. Not to mention the class chat group, even the campus chat group had a heated discussion about her. But Lotus Sun wasn't in a hurry to tell everyone that she was safe. Instead, like Wang Ling, he learned to peek. Chapter 1284. Everything was as the girl had expected. The number of discussions about her was high, and almost every group was talking about her. When a topic aroused the participation and discussion of the people, all kinds of rumors and slanders would naturally follow. But this was all within Lotus Sun's expectations. This was exactly the effect she wanted. She wanted to see the people who were usually polite to her. What kind of attitude would they have after learning that she was about to die? After a lot of summarization, Lotus Sun had roughly divided the comments online into the following categories. 1. Deep sympathy. This was a group of compassionate and kind people, which was especially precious in the context of the environment. Ah! Wasn't the president fine during the competition a few days ago? How did she suddenly? Who knows which hospital she's in? I'm going to see her. I didn't expect something like this to happen to student Lotus Sunday. I'm praying for her. I hope she can overcome her illness soon and tide over this difficult time. I heard that many experts have already come for a consultation. They will definitely be able to save student Lotus Sun. Pray. 2. Eccentric people. These people were different from the official Yin Yang Masters, and belonged to the category of online Yin Yang Masters. To put it simply, these people seemed to be saying nice things, but there was a hint of mockery in their words, which made people unhappy. And those with high status were also known as big Yin Yang. Sure. Elementary Yin Yang Master. Isn't Huaguo Water Curtain Group the world's most powerful pill-making company? Intermediate Yin Yang Master. Sigh, if student Sun can't be cured even with so much money, how are we foundation establishment scums going to survive? Advanced Yin Yang Master. I heard that the experts attending this consultation are all eminent people. Funny, Grand Yin Yang Master. I'm not trying to start a war, I just want to ask, where did this person come from? To be able to gather so many famous experts and have such good medical resources? Envious. Too happy. 3. Gossipers who follow the rumors. One of the biggest characteristics of these people was that they could selectively ignore official news and would never get tired of the gossip circulating on the internet. The biggest difference between following the crowd and ordinary bystanders was that those who followed the crowd would not examine the truth of the matter and would only believe in what they believed. I just saw a message shared by Student Lotus Sun's best friend in another group. She said that Student Lotus Sun's illness was most likely contracted on 9 Dragon Mountain. I didn't expect her to do that kind of thing with a few boys during the competition. Are you serious? Student Sun, haven't you always had high standards? You may know a person's face, but you can't judge his heart. I didn't know that Student Sun was such a person. Flies don't bite seamless eggs. I feel that there might be a problem with Student Sun's style. When she was still alive, no one dared to talk about these things in real life or in online chat groups. This was a novel experience. Lotus Sun looked at these chat records and didn't feel very angry, because these were all false things to begin with. On the contrary, she seemed rather excited. Because for the first time, she felt the joy of peeping. When Lotus Sun shared a screenshot of this group chat with Audiobook, he smiled coldly. Junior Lotus Sun, don't mind it. There will always be people who spread some false information. I don't mind it, I just think it's a little funny. Lotus Sun couldn't help laughing. Junior Lotus Sun is so generous, Audiobook exclaimed. I've long anticipated this situation. Usually, some people are too embarrassed to say it, but now that they know I can't save her, they're letting go. Saying this, the girl forwarded another picture to Audiobook. Look, Senior Joie, there's even a photoshopped picture. And this was the 4th type of people that Lotus Sun had summed up, photoshopped out of nothing. Look. I have screenshots of Student Lotus Sun chatting with other people here. And someone even found Student Lotus Sun's external social media account. It turns out that Student Lotus Sun has always liked girls. No way. Eating melon, there are screenshots. It's absolutely true. And there are a lot of pictures of girls on Student Sun's external social media account. It's suspected to be her ex-girlfriend. My God, I feel like I've eaten a big melon. No wonder Student Lotus Sun rejected my confession before. It's not that she doesn't like me, it's that she doesn't like boys. Junior Lotus Sun, do you know who did it? Audiobook asked. Actually, if one looked closely at these photoshopped pictures, it would be obvious that they were fake. That was because the background color of the fonts and the background color were completely different, the pictures were slightly blurry, and there was a watermark in the lower right corner of the picture, but it was clear that those who had the intention of spreading the word didn't care about these things. They only cared about how big of a melon they had eaten. I have a rough idea. Lotus Sun nodded. Who else could it be? It was none other than the members of the Warriors Club, which was a group of boys whom she had once rejected and turned from fans to haters. Previously, see Chapter 1088, the Rome Protection Club and the Warriors Club. Do you want me to look for them? Get them to clarify it? Audiobook asked with concern. There were actually 2 main reasons for people who had the intention of photoshopping pictures to spread rumors and fabricate stories. One was that there was too little homework, and the other was that they didn't feel responsible for posting things online. Since this concerned the girl's reputation, Audiobook wanted to directly intervene and help Lotus Sun clarify it. In the end, Lotus Sun was more patient than he had imagined. No need, Senior Joie. In any case, it's all fake, Lotus Sun said politely. You really don't need to do anything about it? The main thing is that there's no point in doing anything about it now, Senior Joie. The number of people spreading it isn't high enough to file a case. So you want to, let's see if it ferments later. If it's enough to file a case, we'll directly go after the source, Lotus Sun said calmly. Why does it feel like Junior Lotus Sun has already seen a lot of similar things? Audiobook couldn't help asking. Previously, a competitor company spread rumors and smeared Huagua Water Curtain Group's name, and my grandfather had people deal with it the same way. Bear with it for now and write it down. We'll settle the score after we're sentenced. Audiobook was stunned. As the saying went, it was never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. In the end, this was the thinking of a successor to a financial group. Lotus Sun scrolled through all kinds of comments online and was overjoyed. Senior Joie, this is the first time I've realized that peeping is so interesting. That's right. Audiobook nodded. Even though he was sure that his Shifu Wang Ling was definitely peeping right now. Senior Joie. At that moment, the girl, who had been immersed in the joy of peeping, suddenly had a whim. Audiobook, ? Lotus Sun, what do you think would happen if I sent a string of ellipses in the group? Audiobook, that was impossible. It would scare these people to death. Chapter 1285. After proposing to send an ellipsis, Lu Gan the girl stared at the screen in front of her and fell into deep thought. Audiobook was actually looking forward to the explosive effect of the girl's ellipses. In the large group chat, whether it was the rumor mongers, photoshopped photos, or the bystanders, when they saw the parties involved online, they would definitely have to consider the issue of legal liability. At that time, it would definitely cause a large number of news retractions. It was rare to see such a collective withdrawal of information. But it was clear that Lotus Sun was considering even more problems. The girl hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she did not send out the ellipsis. Junior sister Lotus Sun, aren't you going to be naughty? Audiobook asked with a smile. If I send an ellipsis, classmate Wang Ling will definitely know that I already know that he's an almighty. Lotus Sun was very hesitant. Realization dawned on him. Only then did he realize that the young girl was worried about this matter. Master, that is indeed what I said. He has always kept a low profile. Audiobook nodded. Then I'd better not, otherwise classmate Wang Ling will definitely be troubled. In the end, she resolutely closed the group chat and didn't press the send button. Audiobook sighed with emotion at how sensible Lotus Sun was. No wonder his master was willing to spend so much effort to save him. Who else knows that I was moved into the Buddha's golden lotus? Lotus Sun asked. So far, apart from me, Master, Reverend Golden Lamp, and Senior Death Heavenly Tao, nobody knows. Even Grandpa doesn't know? Yes. Fortunately, I didn't tell Grandpa that I was safe just now. Otherwise, would he think it was a ghost? Lotus Sun couldn't help laughing. The preparations are almost done, Death Heavenly Will said. He had been sensing the movements of the heavenly court. With the cooperation of Grandmaster Jin Dang and the Realm King of the Immortal Realm, a grand tribulation ceremony was about to begin. Divine Tao Star would use divine crystals to recharge all the underground spirit veins on Earth. As a result, the spiritual chi on Earth became richer and more abundant. Complete the upgrade of Earth. From there, they would be able to further liberate the restrictions on Earth. So fast? Audiobook was a little surprised. Grandmaster Jin Dang's speed was unexpected. But there's one last step left. Death Heavenly Tao said. This last step was actually very simple. He needed to convince the major families in God's domain to agree to upgrading Earth. After all, this matter involved the interests of the God domain's upper-class families. Death Heavenly Tao felt that this matter would not be so simple, and a huge battle would be unavoidable. Do you want to take a look? Bring your junior sister along, Death Heavenly Tao asked. Did my Shifu go? Audiobook asked worriedly. There's no need for Ling Jinren to personally deal with those pieces of trash from the domain of the gods. Grandmaster Jin Dang is more than enough to handle it, Death Heavenly Law said. It was precisely because he knew that Wang Ling wouldn't be going in person that he planned to have Audiobook take Lotus Sun with him to see the big scene. Lower-class cultivators spectating a duel between high-level cultivators, apart from broadening their horizons, would also be of great help to their comprehension of Tao. This could be considered Death Heavenly Tao giving Lotus Sun and Audiobook special treatment. On Earth, a Foundation establishment stage cultivator would usually not be able to see a battle between perfected immortals, let alone a battle between perfected immortals. Can I go too? Lotus Sun was a little surprised. You can go, but how much you can remember is up to you. Don't forget that once you return to your body, your memories will disappear, Death Heavenly Tao reminded her kindly. He was actually also frantically giving the girl hints. Memories would disappear. But a good memory wasn't as good as a lousy pen. Don't you have a little notebook? Wouldn't it be over if he just wrote down everything he wanted to remember? However, Death Heavenly Tao couldn't just say it out loud. In the end, it all depended on the girl's comprehension. Then, Senior, how do we get there? Audra asked. Put your hand on my shoulder and I'll teleport directly. Then, Death Heavenly Tao formed a seal with his hand. A golden light blossomed from under his feet and then reached the horizon. This transmission channel was exclusive to Heavenly Tao and was a green passageway leading to the domain of the gods. When the channel opened, non-designated personnel wouldn't be able to sense it. Before the official transmission, Death Heavenly Tao glanced at Lotus Sun in the Buddha's golden lotus. It was very obvious. The girl had already received his hint. She had opened the cloud disk notepad on her computer in advance, intending to record the information manually. This girl was pretty smart. Before the transmission was activated, Death Heavenly Tao couldn't help but smile coldly in his heart. Elsewhere, in the conference hall of the Profound Path Great Hall in the domain of the gods, the top 10 clans in terms of overall combat strength had sent representatives to discuss Earth's upgrade. The Profound Path Great Hall was an iconic building of the domain of the gods, similar to a parliamentary conference hall. At that moment, the clan elders of several large clans had gathered in the conference hall. Although it was called a discussion, it was actually a war of words. What? Upgrade Earth? I don't agree. I definitely don't agree. Back then, Tao ancestors spread cultivation culture to Earth only for the continuation of civilization. And the domain of the gods is the true cultivation tradition. At that moment, an old man with a twisted beard slapped the table and shouted excitedly. The domain of the gods is a peaceful and supreme place for cultivators. It can't be tarnished. This agitated old man was Zhou Zhentian, the clan elder of the Zhou family, who ranked fourth on the ranking of clans in the domain of the gods. The monk had long since anticipated this scene. But looking at the old man in front of him who was spitting saliva everywhere, he couldn't help sighing in his heart. He sighed from the bottom of his heart at the quality of cultivators in the domain of the gods. After all, this touched on the issue of interests. Agitation was understandable. But what kind of place was the domain of the gods? This was the birthplace of cultivation that Tao ancestor Wang had founded back then. In this birthplace, a clan elder who claimed to be an upper-level almighty was loudly berating like a shrew cursing in the street. In the monk's view, this was really a disgrace to cultivators. This kind of bearing really couldn't compare to 1/10,000th of Lingzhenren's. Furthermore, it had clearly deviated from Tao ancestor Wang's original intention back then. Sailing against the current, one would either advance or fall back. In the monk's view, these words were very appropriate to describe the current situation in the domain of the gods. Hey! Monk! See, I told you they wouldn't agree. Holding her head in her hands, Miss Awan sat next to the golden lamp and anxiously watched the war of words in front of her. The monk fiddled with the prayer beads in his hand, his heart unperturbed. After the clan elders in the domain of the gods had finished cursing and expressing their opinions, the monk stood up and bowed to everyone. This humble monk feels that benefactors have misunderstood. Although Earth has been upgraded, there won't be many cultivators on Earth who have made the transition to the domain of the gods. According to the rules set by Tao ancestor Wang back then, only those who have touched the venerated immortal realm are qualified to come to the domain of the gods for further exchanges. Even if Earth completes its upgrade, the number of people who can touch the venerated immortal realm can be counted on one hand. However, the monk's words didn't sway the clan elders. Even so, that won't do. There aren't many now, but what if there are more in the future? Grand Elder Zhou Zhentian of the Zhou family flicked his sleeves and narrowed his eyes at the monk in front of him. There's still a monk. What kind of Buddha are you? What right do you have to represent Earth? If it weren't for the face of the world king of the god world, would you even have the right to speak here? Benefactor, this humble monk thinks you've misunderstood. The monk put his palms together and said sincerely, this humble monk isn't here to speak or ask for anything. Zhou Zhentian snorted. If it's not to speak, then what is it? This is a request. The monk said resolutely, if anyone doesn't agree, this humble monk will have no choice but to take action. Zhou Zhentian instantly laughed. What, you want to kill someone, monk? This humble monk is a monk, I don't kill. At this moment, the monk looked up and opened his mouth. He looked at the clan elder with the twisted beard and smiled. This is called transcendence. Chapter 1286. Everything was as the monk had expected. The cultivators of the domain of the gods had always lived like princes and held high positions. Now, they had instead become a little unmotivated. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before they were bound to become frogs at the bottom of a well, digging their own graves. The easiest way to deal with this group of people was to make them recognize reality. When the monk's swastika opened, the huge meeting hall of Tao Profound Hall was immediately enveloped in a Buddhist light. This wasn't an ordinary Buddhist light. When it fell on the elders present, they could clearly feel the pressure on their shoulders. Some even bent their knees, and nearly couldn't withstand the Buddhist light summoned by the swastika and fell to their knees. This monk from Earth was more powerful than anyone else in the domain of the gods, and many of the elders and new disciples were afraid. In the spiritual space, several of the elders present communicated telepathically with each other. This didn't make sense. They clearly remembered that the strongest person on Earth was currently only a venerated immortal. Apart from that, there was only one true venerated immortal cultivator. Furthermore, there was only one venerated immortal or true venerated immortal. Furthermore, that true venerated immortal had accidentally advanced by eating broccoli. The domain of the gods had been monitoring the situation on Earth, so they didn't think much of it at all. After all, there was indeed a certain probability that those above true immortal could enter this hidden realm. As for immortal Zhen Yuan, they weren't unfamiliar with this name. He belonged to a group of relatively primitive Earth cultivators, so they weren't too surprised that he had advanced to venerated immortal. So the question now was, where on Earth had this monk come from? Is there no one else in the domain of the gods? This poor monk hasn't used his full strength. At that moment, the monk faced the elders of the domain of the gods with a benevolent smile. Indeed, he hadn't used his full strength. The Buddhist light summoned by the swastika wasn't even 10% of its original strength. Who would have thought that some of the elders in front of him would actually be unable to withstand the pressure and would fall to their knees? This made the monk feel very disappointed. He couldn't help wanting to yawn in this kind of boring battle with such a huge disparity in battle strength. But as an eminent monk, Jin Deng still worked hard to maintain the qualities of a superior cultivator. Ever since he fought with Wang Ling, Tyrant felt that it was boring to fight with anyone. Every battle, no matter how big or small, was a process of accumulating experience. However, if a level 99 player were to fight against a bunch of level 5 trash, even if the experience gained was minimal, he would rather consume several hundred lifetimes of cultivation and let Wang Ling slap him a few more times. The monk never regretted his duel with Wang Ling. It could be said that Wang Ling had given him a wake-up call, letting him know that his realm wasn't the strongest, and that there was still room for improvement. In fact, what the monk was doing now was what Wang Ling had done to him back then. He wanted to wake up this group of self-absorbed self-cultivators from the domain of the gods. Monk, your realm is so strong, you could have come to the divine domain long ago. Why are you hiding in a place like Earth where there are scum cultivators everywhere? The Zhou clan's grand elder, Zhou Zhentian, was also shocked by the aura emitted by the monk. In particular, he recognized the swastika on the monk's left eye. This was a power that only the most holy Buddhist could possess. I travel the world. What does it have to do with you where I want to stay? The monk was speechless. He was extremely disappointed with the self-cultivators of the domain of the gods. In the spiritual space, the Zhou clan's grand elder Zhou Zhentian was frantically communicating with the other clan elders. I was wondering why the Wang family, the Gu family and the Lu family didn't send anyone over. It turns out that there's something fishy going on here. The juniors of these families all ran to Earth earlier. Now that I think about it, I'm afraid there really is something going on here. Who on earth is this monk? I'm not sure, but he's very strong. There are many people who cultivate Buddhism, but those who can derive this swastika can be counted on one hand. Even in the domain of the gods, I can only think of a few people who can do it. As he talked with the other clan elders, Zhou Zhentian's thoughts turned rapidly. He recalled the Dharma names of several eminent monks who had attained the Tao. Iron Spirit, Tong Hui, Yin Xian. The monk heard Zhou Zhentian's muttering. Oh. I didn't expect clan elder Zhou to have heard of these Dharma names. Hearing Zhou Zhentian say these names with his own ears, Jin Deng was a little surprised. That's right, monk. It's no big deal that you have the swastika. The 3 most holy Buddhists in our domain of the gods also have it. Zhou Zhentian sneered. What was so great about having only one most holy Buddhist on earth? Their domain of the gods had 3. However, hearing Zhou Zhentian's laughter, the monk couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Zhou Zhentian and sighed. This humble monk doesn't dare to lie to clan elder Zhou. To tell you the truth, the 3 Dharma names that clan elder Zhou mentioned are actually this humble monk's. This. How is this possible? Zhou Zhentian was shocked. The swastika name requires the power of reincarnation to cultivate. Iron Spirit was this humble monk's Dharma name during his 1000 reincarnations. Tong Hui was from 1001 to 1999. Yin Xian was from 2000 to 2999. As for Jin Deng, that's this humble monk's Dharma name now. As the monk explained, he bowed to Zhou Zhentian. So, the 3 Dharma names that clan elder Zhou mentioned, the 3 eminent monks, are actually all me. Moreover, didn't clan elder Zhou notice that these Dharma names are named after gold, silver, copper, and iron? They also have the meaning of reincarnation. This humble monk knows that clan elder Zhou and the other clan elders present have many questions in their hearts now. The monk sighed. However, this is the truth. Monk, don't go too far. Don't think that we won't beat you up just because you have the support of the realm king of the godly realm. At this moment, Zhou Zhentian shouted. The 7 clan elders present couldn't bear the monk's arrogance anymore. Take down this arrogant monk. In the next moment, the 7 clan elders in the meeting hall released their auras. With Zhou Zhentian in the lead, they all took out their Dharma artifacts, swords, knives, axes, and hammers. The scene of 7 Tao masters attacking together could be described as spectacular. The monk sighed in his heart. They were cultivators from the godly realm after all. They used world-defying Dharma artifacts, and they were of the highest grade. This was one of a kind. However, they were too naive to think that they could deal with him with such petty tricks. Put down the butcher's knife. The monk's face was as calm as an ancient well. He put his palms together. Buzz! In the sky, countless golden tentacles appeared out of thin air in the descending Buddhist light. These were the Buddhist tentacles of nothingness. They were summoned by the monk and had the divine power to disarm when he said, "Put down the butcher's knife." In fact, the clan elders had no experience in fighting with a Buddhist saint. They had just taken out their Dharma artifacts and were ready to attack. The Dharma artifacts in their hands were all swept away by these Buddhist tentacles. These Buddhist tentacles were incredibly fast. In the blink of an eye, they appeared around them and took away their Dharma artifacts. Then, they quickly dissipated and escaped into the Buddhist light with their Dharma artifacts. By the time they reacted, they were nowhere to be seen. F***CK. Instead of disarming, it was more like an open robbery. Zhou Zhentian was so angry that his whole body trembled. The 7 Tao masters were humiliated by a monk. Where would their dignity go? Everyone, this monk is strange. We can't fight separately. We have to gather our firepower. After Zhou Jintian finished speaking, the other clan elders understood. They put their hands on the shoulders of the person in front of them and lined up in a row. They transferred their spiritual power through their bodies and finally gathered all their power on Zhou Jintian, who was at the front of the line. This scene caused Ah Wan, who was standing at the side, to laugh hysterically. NNNNNNNNNN. Monk. Are you playing an eagle-catching chicken game? The golden lamp and Zhou Jintian were speechless. P.S. Reorganizing the realms, foundation establishment, golden core, nascent soul, soul formation, itinerant immortal, true venerable, venerable immortal, immortal sage, Tao venerable, Tao god, Tao ancestor. There may be more after Tao ancestor, I'll add more later, Wang Ling. Chapter 1287. He could only say that Miss Ah Wan was indeed Miss Ah Wan. As a realm king of the divine realm who was still growing, she could see through the truth at a glance. This made the monk deeply admire her. This eagle of his was indeed an eagle, but it wasn't the new and long eagle. The 7 great Tao masters led by Zhou Jintian were indeed as weak as chicks in the monk's eyes. The scariest thing for cultivators was not knowing their own strength. The monk had already made this mistake once, so he naturally would not make it a second time. He was a sensible person. He knew how to reflect. He reflected on himself 3 times a day. This was the monk. However, not everyone had self-awareness and would reflect on themselves. Monk. Eat my cannon. The 7 great Tao masters lined up in a vertical line and poured all their psionic energy into Zhou Jintian. They were condensing their magic power. The 6 of them put their hands on the shoulders of the person in front of them and leaned forward slightly, aiming at the monk. The monk instantly understood. These 7 people used the form of a train to turn into a very long cannon barrel. Rumble. The next moment, Zhou Jintian, the leader of the Zhou family, opened his mouth wide, and countless dense psionic cannonballs exploded from his mouth. The monk was astonished by this novel move. He was not surprised because of how powerful this move was. Instead, he felt that these Tao masters from the divine realm were not people with normal brain circuits. How could they come up with such a strange move? But to be honest, it was still very lethal. The 7 great Tao masters gathered their psionic energy into one point, not only sharing the pressure of the consumption of psionic energy, but also making their power more concentrated. Elder Zhou Jintian, who was the leader, turned into a giant abyss in the League of Legends. While leading the people behind him, he constantly began to spit at the monk. The psionic cannonballs were first released from Elder Zhou Jintian's mouth, and then they instantly grew in size to the size of cannonballs. As the cannonballs passed, the space was torn apart, and countless cracks appeared. They bombarded the walls of the meeting hall, blasting out huge holes. Jin Dang, the power was there, but the scene was so beautiful that the monk did not dare to look at it. Beside him, Miss Ah Wan was completely dumbfounded from laughing. She held her stomach and rolled on the ground, laughing like a barbell. The monk did not expect the Tao masters from the divine realm to degenerate to such an extent. All they could think of was some fancy but useless move. What a bunch of fancy things. Tyrant easily dodged the bombardment while advancing forward. His body was surrounded by the Buddha's protective halo. His entire body lit up, making the crimson red moon Kasaya shine even more brilliantly. From the moment the Buddha's light appeared, dodging was no longer important. Tyrant took the cannons head-on. When the cannons hit his body, they were immediately dispersed by the body-protecting Buddha light and disappeared like a clay ox entering the sea. Monk. Don't look down on me. Zhou Jintian still refused to admit defeat. He increased the speed of the psionic cannon in his mouth. At first it was 5 shots per second, but now it was 60 shots per second. Patriarch Zhou Jintian felt like he had transformed into a human cannon. Old Zhou. Can you handle it? The other family elders were worried about Elder Zhou's condition. The 7 elders had come up with the move of the human body spiritual energy cannon together. Previously, Elder Zhou Zhentian's highest record was only 40 breaths in a second. They were worried that Elder Zhou Zhentian's throat wouldn't be able to hold on. This frequency was too fast. It was no different from stuffing a vibrator in one's throat. The next day, one's throat would definitely be hoarse and unable to speak. Don't give up. I can still do it. I must teach this monk a lesson. At that moment, Elder Zhou's eyes were already red with rage. He increased the frequency of his cannons once more. 70 shots per second. Anger once again stimulated Elder Zhou's body's potential. This attack speed was truly astonishing. At the same time, the extremely high rate of fire increased the power of the psionic cannon to a certain extent. But even so, it still couldn't break the Buddha's protective halo around the monk's body. At that moment, Death Heavenly Tao led Odd Zhua and Lotus Sun outside the Profound Path Great Hall. Because a fierce battle had broken out inside, the entire Profound Path Great Hall had been destroyed, so there was no longer any need to enter the hall to watch the battle. Is this a battle between cultivators from the domain of the gods? Lotus Sun was stupefied. Looking at the 7 great Tao venerables who were lined up in a row and crazily firing cannons, she couldn't help falling into deep thought. Little did she know that on the other side, Odd Zhua and Death Heavenly Tao were also dumbfounded. This wasn't right. This was supposed to be a battle between cultivators from the domain of the gods. The destructive power was indeed fierce, but why did it look so silly? Senior Zhua, may I ask, are they performing as human centipedes? The girl's small mouth was slightly agape, and it was hard for her to hide the shock and fear on her face. This was really too frightening. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe it as blinding dog eyes. Senior Death Heavenly Tao, what on earth is going on? Odd Zhua also felt that something wasn't right. It was as if they had clearly entered a 4K theater, but were watching a watermarked movie. Cultivators from the domain of the gods have a very unique way of thinking in battle. This is something that cultivators from Earth don't understand, so it's normal that you don't understand. Death Heavenly Tao cleared his throat as he did his best to explain the battle situation in front of him. After all, the domain of the gods was the birthplace of cultivation. As one of the Heavenly Tao little golden men, Death Heavenly Tao naturally shouldered the mission of protecting the domain of the gods and spreading cultivation culture. Then, Senior Death Heavenly Tao, why are they lining up? Asked Lotus Sunday. Look at the graceful postures of the 7 Tao masters. They put their hands on the shoulders of the person in front of them, and they're as nimble as snakes. This is a combination of swimming dragon out of the sea, and I'm afraid they found inspiration from the lion dance. Cultivation is such a simple subject. You have to find inspiration from the details of life to make breakthroughs easier, replied Death Heavenly Tao. I see. And the ball of spirit power they spit out. This is the performance art of the Tao Masters. They're using this form of magic to warn the world not to spit everywhere. Thus, it can protect the environment and warn the world. As expected of a senior, he can even explain things like this. Lotus Sun couldn't help muttering. What did you say? Nothing. In the Golden Buddha Lotus, Lotus Sun raised her hand again. Then why was their team scattered by Senior Golden Lamp? While the girl was speaking, in the almost destroyed conference hall of the Profound Tao Palace, 7 Tao Masters were sent flying by Golden Lamp's Buddha's palm. The 7 Tao Masters instantly turned into ant-like black dots as they were thrown into the sky. Then, bang 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 bang, one by one, they fell to the ground, 1 pit for each Tao Master. 7 pits had been smashed in total. Death Heavenly Tao wiped at his sweat. This is the Tao Master paying tribute to the famous poet by Ji. As the saying goes, pearls of all sizes fall on a jade plate. The floor of the Profound Tao Palace is like a jade plate. This is also the performance art of the Tao Masters. Hearing this, the girl fell silent. Then she asked one last question. But, why did all 7 elders vomit blood? Death Heavenly Tao put his forehead in his hand. He couldn't make it up anymore. Fuck. A plant. Chapter 1288. Deaf Heavenly Tao had never imagined that the God Realm's clan elder would have reached such a state of idiocy. It wasn't easy for him to bring people back to the God Realm. He had come to accept the influence of a higher level of cultivation culture, but in the end, he was directly invaded by the sand sculpture culture. However, the battle didn't seem to be over yet. Deaf Heavenly Tao had thought that if the 7 Tao Masters joined forces, they would at least be evenly matched with the golden lamp. In the end, it turned out to be a one-sided hammer blow. The monk had defeated 7 great Tao venerables with one palm. If news of this were to spread, the 7 families of the God Realm would lose all their faces. However, the monk didn't go all out. He still held back. Otherwise, 7 people. They all had to die. Apart from Tao ancestor Wang, whose whereabouts were unknown, the only person in the world who could withstand the power of his palm was Ling Zhenren. And after a clear understanding of Wang Ling's strength, even if the monk wanted to fight, he would have to weigh the power of the backlash. It was easy for him to strike with his palm, but the damage from the backlash could paralyze half of his body. At this moment, the 7 Tao Masters got up from the ground and wiped the blood from the corners of their mouths. The monk's palm strike actually made them vomit blood. This was something they had never expected. It was the first time for everyone present to exchange blows with a Buddhist sage. The monk's strength had far exceeded their imagination. "Monk, have you thought about the consequences?" Zhou Zhentian's body was trembling. He was angry, but more than that, he was trembling. His front teeth were broken when he hit the ground, and his mouth was full of blood. Apart from that, his internal injuries were also very serious. He didn't know how long it would take for him to recover. Don't be fooled by the fact that he could still speak. Before long, he would completely lose his voice. In the end, his throat still couldn't withstand the pressure of 70 breaths per second. This penniless monk's actions are also out of consideration for the divine realm. Tyrant glanced at the Tao venerables in front of him. "Elders, are you convinced? If not, I have other means." He wasn't joking. Based on his experience of 3,910 reincarnations, Tyrant had summed up tens of thousands of ways to torture the Tao Master in front of him to a critical condition without being killed instantly. Of course, if he was stubborn. Forcibly transcending was not impossible. Things had come to this. Zhou Zhentian was very clear. He definitely wouldn't be able to beat him. Unless the Patriarch made a move, there might be a glimmer of hope. The patriarchs of the 10 great clans in the God domain were all Tao gods. But how easy would it be to invite a Tao god to help? Currently, almost all of the patriarchs were in a state of closed-door cultivation, and it was impossible for them to easily come out and take action. Zhou Zhentian stared at the monk and felt like he was suffering in silence. If they couldn't stop this, the Earth's upgrade was already a done deal. The monk relied on his strength to do whatever he wanted, leaving them helpless. When did such a terrifying figure appear on Earth? Monk. If it wasn't for the fact that the Patriarch is in seclusion, do you think you could have gotten away with it? Zhou Zhentian looked at the golden lamp. "I admit that I'm no match for you. If you have what it takes, let's spar." "Sparring?" The monk smiled. "I'll keep you company." At this time, the 7 Tao Masters stepped forward. They were faced with a difficult problem. Take Earth's upgrade for example. A monk. Let me ask you, the God's domain is a high-level cultivation path. How did these miscellaneous cultivators on Earth walk it? In my opinion, there is no high or low cultivation path. There is no path to cultivation, but with people, there will be a path. Monk, you are a monk. Why do you want to fight for the Earth's cultivators? Tao Master is asking me a question. Are you arguing with me? The God's domain has been arrogant for a long time, and it shouldn't continue to fall. For the Tao Master to ask such a question, I can only lament its misfortune and be angry at its failure to fight. The Tao Masters have already asked me 2 questions. Can I ask you one? Let's hear it. A function y equals f, x, defined on R, if it satisfies f, x1, f, x2, x1, x2 is 0 for any unequal real numbers x1 and x2, and x and y satisfy the inequality f, x, 2x, plus f, 2y, y, less than or equal to 0. If 0 is true, then when 1 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 4, the range of values for y/x is? Is it too difficult? The monk frowned. Do you know power functions? What about trigonometric and inverse trigonometric functions? You know a function of 1 degree, right? The 7 Tao masters shook their heads, dumbfounded. In the gods' domain, they actually didn't pay much attention to math problems. The monk sighed helplessly. If you don't know anything, how can you be a Tao master? The corner of Zhou Zhentian's mouth twitched. Monk, we are reincarnating Tao. What kind of bullshit questions are you asking? Isn't the great Tao of mathematics a part of Tao? The monk smiled. He would never forget the scene of him vomiting blood after being electrocuted by the overwhelming number of functions when he had held Wang Ling's memory brick. The monk didn't want to experience this kind of pain a second time, and he decided to generously share this more painful experience. The pain of such a devilish thing alone was nothing compared to the pain of all. Monk, you are twisting words and forcing logic. A monk doesn't lie. These functions contain profound knowledge. If you can't even comprehend them, you won't be able to do anything. If you can't comprehend them, I can say with certainty that your realm will stop here and never improve. At that moment, the monk shook his head. He condensed the painful memory fragment from when he had touched the memory brick into a ball of spirit power in his palm. He then stared at the Tao masters in front of him. If you don't believe me, you can take a look at this poor monk's memory. The 7 Tao masters were skeptical and looked at each other for a while. In the end, it was Elder Zhou Zhentian who stood up. It's just a math problem, I don't believe it's so scary. Then, Zhou Zhentian directly stretched out his hand. The moment his fingertip touched the ball of spirit power, he instantly felt like he had been electrocuted. Not good. Elder Zhou hurriedly wanted to let go. But it was already too late. The terrible memory poured into his spiritual space, and in that instant, it was as if he had been struck by lightning. His whole body twitched wildly from the electricity. By the time the other Tao masters came back to their senses, Elder Zhou was already lying on the ground with his butt in the air. He stared at Elder Zhou, who had been charred black by the power of knowledge. The monk couldn't help sighing sympathetically. He swept his gaze over the people in front of him. And Lord Tao Master, do you want to try? Forget it, the remaining 6 Tao Masters took a step back. Let's go back. At that moment, Death Heavenly Tao, who had witnessed the Tao discussion with Odd Zhua and Lotus Sun outside the temple, felt very helpless. They couldn't beat him, and had suffered because of their lack of culture. The domain of the gods had indeed declined. In the golden Buddha lotus, the girl was also greatly disappointed. That's it? Death Heavenly Tao smiled bitterly. Whether it's on earth or in the domain of the gods, studying hard is never wrong. Chapter 1289. The martial battle and the civil battle ended with the 7 great Tao masters crushing defeat. They could slowly cultivate if they couldn't win, but as a big shot in the divine territory, it was a bit unreasonable for them to suffer a loss because they were uncultured. However, the monk knew very well that this matter wasn't over yet. The 7 great Tao masters were still struggling. Because they still had one last hope. That was to invite the clan masters of the 7 great clans. The Wang family, Gu family, and Lu family, these 3 leaders definitely couldn't be counted on. However, Zhou Zhentian felt that there was still room to turn the situation around as long as one of the remaining 7 families could come forward. So while the civil battle was going on, the 7 great Tao masters were secretly communicating with the leaders who were in seclusion. They hoped that one of them could act on their behalf and help them. There was no need to kill the monk, as long as they could make the monk retreat in the face of difficulties and protect the interests of the divine territory. And in the face of such a small trick, the monk still had a smile on his face. His heart was as clear as a mirror. whether it was a civil battle or a martial battle. That was all Zhou Zhentian's trick to stall for time. Monk, this is the last wave. If you can withstand the Tao God's will, we won't interfere in the matter of upgrading the earth. Zhou Zhentian flung his sleeves and laughed wildly as he spoke. Just a second before the Zhou family's grand elder spoke, the Zhou family's leader had already communicated with him. They retreated to the side of the profound Tao Palace, intending to watch the show. No matter how strong this monk was, could he be stronger than a Tao god? They didn't believe it. In this world, other than Tao ancestor Wang, the Tao god realm could be said to be the god realm that was second only to one and above all. When a Tao god descends, no one can compare. Hey, why do you want to die for no reason? At this moment, Miss Awan, who was watching from the crowd side. Zhou Zhentian, who retreated to the side, was in a good mood. Lord Realm King, why don't you persuade the master to leave quickly? The Tao God's will hasn't descended yet, there's actually still room for redemption. If he gets injured here and loses his cultivation, we won't care. This is indeed a suicidal behavior. Hearing this, Miss Awan rolled her eyes at Zhou Zhentian and silently shook her head. She said suicidal, but she didn't mean the monk. People without self-awareness were indeed terrifying. In the shattered profound doctrine grand hall, Tyrant raised his head and looked at the sky at a 45 degrees angle. He could see that the originally cloudless skies of the god domain were suddenly shrouded by countless white clouds. These white clouds gradually separated into a blood-red color and turned into blood vessels before finally condensing into the shape of a brain. The Tao God's brain has appeared, and its will is about to come and claim it. The 7 great Tao venerables looked up at the sky. Currently, the sky above the entire God's domain was dyed with a gloomy blood-red color, giving off an incomparably dense pressure. The powerful mental pressure was only at the initial stage, but it had already formed a blood-stained sky and a trembling earth. Tao God will. Oh no, I'm too late. Deaf Heavenly Tao frowned. This pressure made it difficult for him to breathe. Helpless, he could only open his inner world and take in Odd Jua, who had touched the Buddha Golden Lotus, as well as Lotus Sun to protect them. What's wrong, Senior? Odd Jua didn't understand what on earth was going on. I didn't expect the Tao sovereign to summon the Tao God's will. And it must be the Zhou clan's patriarch. Death Heaven frowned. When the Tao God will descended, the entire space of the God domain would be sealed, making it impossible to leave or enter. He had wanted to leave with Odd Jua and Lotus Sun, but he was still too late. There was no doubt that the Tao God's power was strong. None of the 6 main heavenly Tao was a match for the Tao God. One could only imagine how strong it was. We have to get far away. Death Heavenly Tao subconsciously distanced itself from the profound path hall when it sensed this extraordinary mental pressure. This Tao God will was coming from Monk Jin Deng in the center of the profound path hall. The main pressure was concentrated there, and the surrounding area was only affected by the Tao God will's radiation. Thus, the further away they were, the less pressure there was. Ahahaha. Monk. Come and transcend. Aren't you very capable? If you're capable, then transcend this Tao God will. Zhou Zhentian, the Zhou clan's grand elder, couldn't stop laughing. He had tolerated the monk for a long time. Now that the Tao God will was about to arrive, he could already imagine the scene of the monk getting beaten up. In the profound path hall, the monk silently turned the prayer beads in his hand. He stared at the sky that was dyed red with blood. The brain of the Tao God that was formed from the clouds was becoming clearer and clearer in his line of sight, almost condensing into a solid substance. This enormous brain of the Tao God seemed to fill the entire sky of the divine realm. Countless spiritual energy was absorbed by it, and then it bloomed from within, emitting an immortal sound that shook one's heart. This was the sound of the heavens breathing. And the will of the Tao God was the will of the heavens. It is indeed a powerful force. The monk looked at this scene, his heart as calm as still water. Compared to the 7 great Tao sovereigns, this kind of power was barely enough. Monk, are you still not going to make a move? Are you so scared that you don't dare to move? Zhou Jintian reprimanded. The formation of this Tao God will require a certain amount of time. If it was finally formed, its power would be at its strongest. The best way to stop the will of the Tao God was to make a move before it was completely formed and destroy the brain of the Tao God in the sky. However, it was not an easy task to defeat the brain of the Tao God. The monk did not make a move, which confused Zhou Jintian. He felt that the monk was most likely scared silly. Otherwise, how could he miss such a good opportunity? In the center of the profound Tao hall, the monk silently chanted Buddhist scriptures. He waited for about 3 minutes. Then, he suddenly raised his head. Facing the brain of the Tao God in the sky, he stretched out his hand. The moment the monk stretched out his hand, it grew bigger and bigger. His palm was filled with spiritual energy, and he fiercely slapped the brain of the Tao God. This hand stretched for hundreds of kilometers, and it seemed to be able to cover the entire world. Is this monk crazy? No. He did it on purpose. This monk is not afraid of the Tao God at all. Oh my God! Who is this monk? At this moment, the 7 great Tao sovereigns finally understood why the monk did not make a move. He was not scared out of his wits. Instead, he was waiting on purpose. Until the Tao God will finally formed, and when the spiritual pressure was at its peak, he made his move. To fight against the will of the Tao God. The monk's ability to resist the will of the Tao God with one hand shocked everyone present. The brain of the Tao God sensed the disobedience in front of it and instantly released a powerful divine lightning. Rumble. In an instant, the sky surged like a silver snake, as if it wanted to shatter the monk's hand that was wrapped around the brain of the Tao God. It's useless. The monk shook his head. When the divine lightning struck his palm, it felt like it was tickling him. He didn't take a mere Tao God's will seriously at all. He knew. When Tao ancestor Wang became a Tao God, he was by his side. That scene of the tribulation, heaven and earth were disobedient, space disintegrated, and everything was distorted by a powerful force, like a fried dough twist, like the beginning of the universe. The monk had witnessed such a grand scene with his own eyes. He really did not care about the will of the Tao God. Disperse. In the next moment, the monk gradually closed his 5 fingers. As long as he crushed the brain of the Tao God, everything would be resolved. However, at this moment, suddenly, another brain of the Tao God appeared in the sky. It stood side by side with the brain that the monk was about to grab. The head of the Li family also made a move. At this moment, a Tao sovereign cried out. The head of the Li family's Tao God hadn't fully formed yet. But it was rare to see 2 brains of the Tao God side by side against a common enemy. All the cultivators in the domain of the gods were dumbfounded. Who on earth was it? To attract the attention of 2 Tao gods. To have 2 Tao gods join forces to resist it. In an instant, the mental pressure in the world increased. But the monk remained calm in the face of this scene. 2 brains of the Tao God. The monk raised his eyebrows. After confirming that the Gu, Wang, and Lu families wouldn't make a move, that was to say, the remaining 7 Tao gods could join the battle at any time. The monk could still control the current situation. But if all 7 Tao gods joined in, he might not be able to hold on. After all, the monk had already lost 3,000 lifetimes of cultivation in his previous battle with Wang Ling. With his remaining cultivation of 910 lifetimes, fighting 3 was already his limit. If there were more, he would need Ling Zhenren's help. But the monk didn't panic. Because he had already sensed that the strongest man on earth was already paying attention to this place. He was watching the screen, ready to make a move if necessary. This poor monk will do his best to deal with this myself. The monk sighed in his heart and opened his palm a little wider. At the same time, he covered the 2 brains of the Tao God. Then, like those old men in the park who played with walnuts, he turned them around. He pinched the 2 brains of the Tao God in his palm and spun them around. The 2 brains of the Tao God in the monk's palm rubbed and spun like a washing machine, making a gurgling sound. This scene made Miss Awan laugh so hard that she rolled around on the ground. It was still that incomparably demonic, barbell-like laughter. Chapter 1290. The scene of the monk fighting the two Tao gods stunned all the cultivators in the god realm. For a moment, their spiritual senses formed a sea, and countless gazes converged on the profound doctrine hall. Although few cultivators dared to approach the core area of the Tao god's will, they still used their spiritual senses to observe the battle from afar. The monk held up the sky with one hand, toying with the two Tao gods' will in the palm of his hand. This made countless cultivators in the god realm incredulous. Even the cultivators living in seclusion in the deep mountains and forests of the god realm raised their heads, alarmed by this powerful aura. Countless spiritual birds flew out of the forest in surprise. They chirped and covered the entire sky. It created a magical scene as if night had fallen. This is a cultivator from Earth? When did such a person appear on Earth? Buddhism was holy, terrifyingly powerful. Obviously, the two patriarchs of the Zhou and Li families didn't expect the monk to be so powerful. Boom! At this moment, there was a loud noise, and the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. The monk's giant hand that was holding the two Tao gods' brains broke free. In the sky that was shrouded in blood, a giant hoof print of a prehistoric beast appeared, charging towards the monk's palm like a mountain. The beast had a giant horn on its head, and its face was ferocious. Its body erupted with heavenly lightning brought by the Tao god's will, surrounded by black lightning. This was a creature summoned by the two Tao gods' brains in order to escape. Even a divine beast has appeared. Many experts in the god realm exclaimed, shocked by the scene in front of them. Rumor had it that the seven Tao gods all had their own divine beasts. At first, they extracted the power of chaos to breed an egg. After tens of thousands of years of incubation and a lot of effort to cultivate it, it had today's combat power. Although the two Tao gods' wills had arrived together, they were still fighting separately. They didn't expect the monk to capture them so quickly. In order to escape, they chose to summon it together. This mixed Yuan sky horn was raised by the Zhou family's patriarch. At the same time, the two Tao gods' wills knew that this summoned divine beast could only help them for a short period of time. The monk was too powerful, he was stronger than they had imagined. Now that they had summoned it, it was to buy time for the Li family's patriarch's wills to take shape. A divine beast born from chaos, the monk was silent. He actually had one too. However, his mythological beast was still in the shape of an egg. It had been incubated for almost 300 times, but it still hadn't hatched. At this moment, the Zhou family head's chaos origin heavenly horn beast charged toward his palm with a hoof print the size of a mountain. This scene alarmed everyone in the god domain. The monk didn't even put it in his eyes. He used the back of his hand to slap the divine beast away. Rumble. With a loud bang, a rift tens of thousands of feet long appeared in the sky. Everyone thought that this mixed Yuan sky horn beast might be of some use. Who knew that this beast would be sent back to the chaos by the monk with a single palm strike? This monk is too terrifying. The powerhouses of the realm of the gods sighed inwardly. This was a real fight between immortals. Lotus Sun and Odd Zhuo were already dumbstruck. Senior Golden Lamp, you're amazing. Lotus Sun had long known that the monk was very strong and not an ordinary person. However, the concept of power was very vague. Now that he was there, he had personally witnessed the famous scene of the monk fighting against two Tao gods and slapping the divine beasts away with a backhand. For a moment, Lotus Sun's thoughts ran wild, and she truly felt the terror and shock that transcended dimensional power. The head of the Zhou family had long known that the chaos origin heavenly horn beast wouldn't be able to hold out for long. But as soon as it appeared, it was sent back by the monk with a single palm strike. This was something that the head of the Zhou family had never expected. Fortunately, the will of the Tao god from the head of the Li family had quickly taken shape in this short period of time. Now, two fully formed Tao god brains had descended into the sky and joined forces to fight the monk. This made the monk's expression turn a little more serious. His palm once again blossomed with boundless Buddhist light. Countless Buddhist seals crawled along his fingers and covered his entire arm. Infinite Buddhist seal. This was one of the monk's trump cards. When the Buddhist seal covered his entire arm, it could greatly increase his fighting strength. Now, he infused all of the Buddhist seals into his right hand. Condense power. It became the true Buddha's palm. The monk's palm grew a little more as he grabbed at the two Tao God brains. A swastika symbol appeared in his palm. The swastika seal suppressed everything. The scene was like a comet crashing into the mind of every spectator. The monk had a clear assessment of his fighting strength. Not to mention two Tao God brains. Even the complete form of 3 would not be able to withstand one of his palms. If not for the fact that he had lost 3,000 lifetimes of cultivation, the 10 Tao gods would not be a match for him. However, at this moment, 2 more explosions rang out in the sky. Another new Tao god had joined. And there were 2 of them. Countless people were shocked. The head of the Wu family and the head of the Zhao family have also joined. Retreat. The 7 great Tao sovereigns were shocked. They were extremely close to the battlefield. The wills of the 2 Tao gods attacked the core area of the profound Tao hall. They could barely withstand the radiation. However, the arrival of the 4 Tao gods, they already had a premonition that they would not be able to withstand it. If the wills of the Wu family and the Zhao family were fully formed, even if they were Tao sovereigns, if they were too close to the core area, they would be unable to move like toads. Buzz. The 4 Tao gods had descended. The terrifying mental pressure caused the god domain to split apart. With the profound Tao hall as the center, the ground there split open on the spot and extended for thousands of miles. Powerful psionic energy spread out. It was an unstoppable force that destroyed everything in its surroundings. The monk smiled bitterly in his heart. He did not expect that he would be able to force out the 4 Tao gods. The scene was gradually getting out of control. You've gone too far. Right at this moment, a pure and holy feather tore through the air and pierced through the sky. As the feather shuttled through the air, it grew larger at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it turned into an astonishing feather sword that slashed at the brain of the Tao god. It came from the west side of the profound Tao hall. It was Miss Awan who had joined the battle. The monk saw the young girl flapping the wings behind her and soaring into the sky with her petite body. She did not fear the pressure of the 4 Tao gods at all. She used her divine will to control the feather sword and slashed in the air. It emitted a terrifying divine aura. Countless angel feathers drifted down from the sky like falling rain. Realm King of the God Realm. This is a battle of the cultivation world. Are you going to interfere? Bang! The sound of the Tao god that caused one's mind to ripple rang out from all directions. Just the sound wave of the Tao god dispersed the young girl's sword ray. As it was too chaotic and ethereal, no one could tell which family head it was. I'm here to mediate. Don't think that the 4 of you are having a good time now. You might have to pay the price later. Miss Awan reminded them kindly. The young girl's attitude was already very clear. Compared to the Tao gods of the God realm, she did not want to offend the man who was peeping on earth. She was also considering whether to interfere at this time. She knew her own strength. Before she became the myriad-winged god, she could not possibly be a match for these Tao gods. In fact, she could not help the monk at all. However, Miss Awan was also very clear. These Tao gods did not dare to attack her. Otherwise, if a war of the gods broke out, the god realm would not be able to withstand it. To deal with a monk, the 4 Tao gods had come down. This was something that none of the god realm cultivators had expected. Normally, the patriarchs of these large families would not easily show themselves. If the monk died in this battle, it would be a legendary battle. Was it too much? It seemed rather too much, but what no one could have expected was that there was still more to come. Not long after Miss Awan, World King of the God Realm, kindly reminded them. 3 more Dao gods joined the battle. They came from the Ai family, the Chu family and the Xing family. Now, the 7 Dao gods had come down. Apart from the Gu family, the Wang family and the Lu family, the heads of the other 7 families had all made their moves. Do you want to compete with this poor monk to see who is more excessive? The monk asked. So what? The Dao god's voice echoed. The 7 Dao gods had made their stance very clear. It was fine if they didn't make a move, but since they made a move, they had to kill the monk. At that moment, the monk stared at the scene in the sky where the 7 Dao gods had come down and laughed bitterly in his heart. Ling Zhenren, you can make your move now. If you don't, this poor monk will really have to meet Buddha. As soon as the monk said that, in the God realm, a hand that could envelop the entire God realm. It stretched out from an inexplicable direction and joined the battle. With just a middle finger, it pierced through the Dao god's brain of the Zhou family. Chapter 1291. In the forbidden area, Head Zhou spat out blood on the spot. He had no time to react to what had happened. He had used the will of a Dao god to condense the brain. In an instant, a huge hole had been made in it. The pain of the backlash from the brain's forcible disintegration was reflected back on him. Just this one blow had cost him 100 lifetimes of cultivation. Seclusion had been for nothing. Damn it, Head Zhou stood up. His Dao god body released spirit qi to condense a spirit fog to heal his injuries. Not long after. Boom. Bam. The Zhou family's patriarch's aura surged once again. Some spirit talismans with primal chaos crawled all over his body. They were extremely dense. At this crucial moment, the Zhou family's patriarch condensed his own Dao God seal and covered his entire body with it. No one can challenge the supreme domain of the gods. This Dao God seal, which contained his 200 lifetimes of cultivation, was all his dignity. Powerful spirit power spread out, and Head Zhou's body glowed. The ground in the depths of the Zhou family's forbidden area shook. Head Zhou stopped condensing his Dao God will, and decided to break out of the formation and fight in person. However, just as he was about to move, a figure flashing with the light of Buddha descended from the sky with his bald head down. The monk was here. Like a golden meteorite falling from the universe, he bluntly smashed Head Zhou's head with his fist, then turned into a streak of fire as he charged toward the Zhou family's forbidden area. After a huge explosion that shook the earth and the mountains, a huge explosion occurred. The monk's smooth forehead hit Head Zhou's skull. The two heads collided, and Head Zhou's skull split open on the spot. He directly fainted. As expected of a Dao god. First he suffered Ling Zhenren's backlash, then you smashed his head, but he didn't die. Miss Awan followed behind the monk like a little attendant. She crouched next to Head Zhou's corpse and pinched his shoehorn face. Wow! A Dao god's face is so soft. Jin Dang. So, do you want to stab him? At that moment, Miss Awan took out her feather sword, and golden angel feathers floated in the air over the Zhou family's forbidden area. No need. The monk shook his head. I didn't plan to kill him. Miss Awan was shocked. Then why are you so ruthless? Tyrant said, this strength is just right. It can make him unconscious for a while, but not kill him. Miss Awan said, but I still don't understand, monk, why did you hit him? Jin Dang shook his head and laughed in spite of himself. I'm saving him. If I don't knock him out, rushing out would be courting death. That makes sense. Awan was suddenly enlightened. At this moment, in the god domain, all the cultivators were stunned. Which patriarch has joined the battle? The 7 great Dao gods were alarmed by this hand. This was because they could clearly feel that the otherworldly hand didn't come directly from the divine realm. They condensed their own Dao god wills to explore the area. In the end, he was surprised to find that the extraterrestrial hand actually came from Earth. It actually came from so far away. The remaining 6 Dao gods were shocked. Isn't that monk the #1 figure on Earth? Where did the owner of this pair of hands come from? The conversation of the 6 great Tao gods made the monk, who was in the forbidden area of the Zhou family, smile. The number 1 figure on earth? He had never said that before. Wang Ling had disintegrated Patriarch Zhou's Tao god brain with just his middle finger. This was something that no one had ever expected. In the sky, the remaining 6 Tao god brains had all condensed into form. Even without Patriarch Zhou, when the wills of the 6 Tao gods gathered together, they still burst out with world-shaking spiritual pressure. The 6 brains of the Tao god were like 6 divine suns, hanging high in the sky. Is this expert on earth not going to show his true form? A voice rang out in the god domain again. The tone was flat, but it was deafening. Very quickly, the virtual bodies of the 6 Tao gods appeared in the sky. These were virtual images formed by the Tao gods' Tao wills. Their faces couldn't be seen clearly, but they were connected to the souls of the 6 Tao gods. They were waiting. At that moment, the otherworldly hand in front of them scattered into a vast expanse of light particles that sprinkled in the god domain. When the light particles gathered again, they formed Wang Ling's figure. After all, the 6 Tao ancestors hadn't shown themselves in their true forms, and Wang Ling couldn't be bothered to do so. Since they had also condensed a virtual image of their wills to meet each other, Wang Ling could already be considered the greatest courtesy he could offer. Although they also couldn't see the virtual image of Wang Ling's will clearly. The 6 Tao gods could sense that this was the figure of a young man. Its classmate Wang Ling. Lotus Sun could also tell. She hadn't seen Wang Ling's face, but she had recognized his silhouette from the virtual image's back. First, he had appeared to destroy a Tao god brain, then appeared as a virtual image, intending to fight 6 gods alone. Wang Ling's strength was beyond the girl's imagination. Was classmate Wang Ling born this powerful? Lotus Sun gazed at the confrontation between the immortals in the sky, and the expression on her face could no longer be described as astonishment. Ling Jinren's strength can't just be described as powerful. Deaf Heavenly Tao gasped in amazement at the scene in front of them. It couldn't help recalling those primitive times. At that moment, Wang Ling's figure seemed so familiar, yet so strange. In the next moment, the virtual images of the 6 Tao gods attacked simultaneously. They moved horizontally at an incredible speed, shrinking the ground to inches as they shuttled through space. One forward and one backward, they covered a distance of 10,000 zhang. A silver stripe attacked from a tricky angle and locked onto Wang Ling's virtual image. Got him. With the shout of one of the family heads, the other 5 Tao gods instantly closed in from all directions. They collided with Wang Ling with their virtual bodies, and their killing intent was clear. Boom! The virtual images collided and the world shook. The vast will of the Tao gods engulfed the entire domain of the gods, which was instantly enveloped in an overwhelming pressure. The cultivators of the domain of the gods could no longer bear it. Some hid in their inner worlds, while others directly chose to flee. They're actually using virtual images to set up a trap. In the sky, after the virtual images collided, they were instantly enveloped in an invisible spirit fog. Deaf Heavenly Tao's cultivation couldn't break through the Tao God's spirit fog. But they could already see some clues. The Tao gods had used their virtual images to set up a trap. They looked like they were recklessly charging at Wang Ling's virtual images, but in fact, this was a joint sealing technique. The virtual images carried part of the power of their Tao God seals. Using several lifetimes' worth of cultivation, each of them could condense a powerful sealing force. After the virtual image trap collided with Wang Ling's virtual image, the power of the Tao God seal spread like a crawling insect, instantly covering Wang Ling's virtual image and erupting with dazzling divine light. The runes gathered by every Tao God seal are 10,000 trillion in weight. This is why. The weight of a god. The 6 Tao gods were even more pleased with themselves. They hadn't expected it to be so easy to suppress. After all, this was the weight of a god. It was impossible for anyone to break free. But in the next moment, Wang Ling twisted his shoulders. He stomped his foot. The Tao God seals that were binding the illusionary image were like fish scales that had been cut off, instantly disintegrating. They were shaken to pieces. Just for a moment. The battle was over. In the sky, the brains of the 6 Tao gods dissipated into nothingness. The oppressive red clouds instantly dispersed, and the sun shone brightly in a cloudless sky. Bam 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 bam, the 6 Tao gods were shaken to the point of vomiting blood in their respective families' forbidden areas. But the battle wasn't over yet. What greeted the 6 Tao gods next was the monk's head hammer that fell from the sky. The monk had already split himself into 6 clones and aimed them at the family forbidden areas of the 6 Tao gods. He planned to kill them one at a time. This would completely cut off the possibility of these Tao gods counterattacking. Chapter 1292. In the profound Tao hall, the monk and Miss Awan each carried a few of them, piling up the 7 Tao gods' corpses like a human pyramid. After the monk's east wind, 100% blood lock knockout, 10,000 Li head hammer technique. The 7 Tao gods became like this, and they were still in a state of unconsciousness until now. Blood mixed with yellow liquid flowed out. Miss Awan noticed that it was flowing out of the head of the Zhou family. Of the 7 Tao gods, the head of the Zhou family was the most miserable. It was also a backlash, but only Patriarch Zhou's Tao god brain had been directly pierced by Wang Ling's finger. In other words, the damage from the backlash had been maxed out. After suffering from the most severe backlash and the monk's head hammer, the bones in his head were fractured. In other words, of the 7 Tao gods, only the head of the Zhou family had been split open. Monk, don't tell me it's his brain. Miss Awan frowned and asked, pinching her nose. Don't worry, Miss Awan. This is a Tao god, he won't die if his brain drips out. Jin Deng's face was kind. Also, it will only benefit him. Monk, what do you mean? The brain that's flowing out now might be the water that flowed out of his head when he chose to attack. The monk sighed deeply. How could the heads of the Wang, Gu, and Lu families be so clear about this? Wouldn't it be fine if they just went into seclusion? Their cultivation wasn't high enough, but they still had to intervene. That was great. With the backlash, the head of the Zhou family had lost 100 lifetimes of cultivation. Of course, the other heads weren't much better. On average, the 7 Tao ancestors had 80 lifetimes. The Lu family was ranked 10th among the top 10 families of the domain of the gods. After this wave, the head of the Lu family would probably replace the Zhou family and leap to 3rd place. The monk could almost imagine the way the head of the Lu family couldn't help laughing in the forbidden area. Now, the situation was set. After the 7 Tao gods were beaten up, it was a foregone conclusion that Earth would level up. Elders, please come out. The monk turned the prayer beads in his hand and glanced in one direction without looking up. Master. Several Tao masters walked out of the ruins and trembled at the scene in front of them. They would never have imagined that such a scene would occur. Jin Deng took out a contract from his sleeve. All of you are clan elders. Right now, your clan heads are obviously unable to move. All of you will act as representatives and sign the contract with your blood. Sign it. After the signature is completed, it will be considered that you have agreed to the plan to upgrade Earth, and you can take away the corpse of a family head as a reward. The Tao masters' mouths twitched. It was obvious that he had no other choice. Their patriarch's injuries were very serious. If they continued to delay, there might be some trouble. Losing one more lifetime of cultivation meant that their family's heritage would decrease by a bit. They could not afford such a loss. Let me go first. No. Don't fight with me. Let me sign first. My family's patriarch's injuries are the most serious. Bullshit. The head of the Xing family was the one who suffered the most. Can't you see that his neck has sunk into his collarbone? Then, the 7 Tao masters began to fight over the contract. The monk could not help but sigh inwardly at this scene. If he had known that this would happen, he would not have done it in the first place. Just like that, it dragged on for another hour. The 7 great Tao venerables fought for the right to sign first, and they fought again on the spot before they finished signing. When they returned to the clan's land with their respective family heads, they were all bruised and swollen. Take care, everyone. When your patriarch wakes up, remember to tell him that the monk was the one who hit him, and it had nothing to do with me. Miss Awan waved her hand as she watched the elders leave. At this point, the preparations for upgrading Earth were ready. The monk put away the contract and was about to go back when a stream of light suddenly descended from the sky. To the monk's surprise, this person did not dress like a clan elder, but seemed to be just an old servant. But this old servant's combat strength was surprisingly strong. He had actually reached the level of an upper Dao master. It should be noted that the 7 clan elders who had attacked just now were Grand Clan elders. Most of them were just low-level Dao masters, and the strongest Zhou clan elder was a middle-level Dao master. The monk turned the Buddha beads and deduced the old servant's origin. Are you from the Wang clan? Greetings, Master Jin Deng. Master's foresight is divine, I admire you. The servant looked peaceful, and he did not come to the pottery shelf this time. After all, the Wang clan, Gu clan, and Lu clan were all understanding people, and were not as itchy as the remaining 7 clans. As he spoke, the servant also took out a contract from his lapel. This was the joint agreement of the 3 patriarchs of the Wang clan, Gu clan, and Lu clan, personally stamped with the patriarch's seal. Now this old servant of the Wang clan sent it on their behalf. The old man presented the joint contract with both hands, and at the same time, he looked apologetic. When the 7 patriarchs fought earlier, the 3 patriarchs did not help you. I hope you can understand, I don't mind. The monk smiled. The most taboo when in seclusion is to have your mind shaken. There is a reason why the Gu clan and the Wang clan have been the top 2 in the God realm for so many years. I would also like to thank the 3 patriarchs for sending me this joint contract to show my sincerity. This old man admires the master's bearing. After saying that, the old man looked around again. The monk knew who he was looking for. Ling Jinren has already left. It's a pity that I wasn't able to meet Ling Jinren. The old man sighed. He had killed the Zhou clan's Dao god as soon as he appeared, and then defeated 6 Dao gods with just the power of a virtual body. What kind of terrifying power was this? When the patriarch of the Wang family had stamped the joint contract, he had specially told the old man that if he saw Ling Jinren, he must greet him. But now, it seemed that the time had yet to come. In the end, some things couldn't be forced. Although Ling Jinren has left, he left something for me to give to the 3 patriarchs, and I hope you can deliver it on my behalf. At that moment, the monk's words made the old man's eyes light up. Ling Jinren actually left something behind? What is it? In fact, this was also this poor monk's suggestion. The monk smiled. The 3 patriarchs are still in seclusion and haven't made a move from beginning to end. Thus, this poor monk believes that the remaining 7 big clans won't let the matter rest. If they join forces to retaliate now, I'm afraid it will be another disaster. You're right, master. The old servant of the Wang family nodded. Thus, I had Ling Jinren leave behind 3 golden talismans. As the monk spoke, his fingertips moved, and 3 streams of light flowed out from between his fingers to hit the old servant's hand in front of him. The old servant's hands trembled as he gripped the golden talismans. Dare I ask, master, how do I use these golden talismans? The monk smiled. If you run into trouble, shout, quickly go and invite my Buddha Wang Ling. That'll do. Chapter 1293. In the distance, Death Heavenly Tao, who had yet to leave the domain of the gods, didn't know what to say to describe his current mood. Senior, will the 7 families who attacked really attack us again after being beaten so badly? Lotus Sun asked the Buddha's golden lotus. In the domain of the gods, apart from the Gu family and the Wang family who often take turns in first and second place, the rankings of the other 8 families change more or less every year. When the gap between them isn't too big, there's no way for them to truly stabilize their rankings, Death Heavenly Tao said. Even if the 7 families don't attack the Wang and Gu families, I'm afraid they'll join forces to settle accounts with the Liu family, which is ranked 10th. The Liu family was the only one who had gotten off easy in this incident. The foundations of the 7 families couldn't catch up to the Wang and Gu families to begin with, so they didn't really have much of an impact on them. But after this battle, their foundations had been shaken. This was equivalent to shortening the gap between the Liu family and the 7 families. In order to prevent the Liu family from taking advantage of the chaos to rise to power, it was very likely that the 7 families would join forces to seek revenge. Furthermore, they would only pick on the weak. Can the heavenly Tao punish Tao gods? Zhuo asked curiously at that moment. Except for the whitelist users and Tao ancestors, no one can stand above the heavenly Tao. Death Heavenly Tao sighed. I can't fight Tao gods now, mainly because the power of the heavenly Tao has been divided. If we 3,000 heavenly Tao combine, we can hang Tao gods up. Then can you hang my Shifu up and beat him up? No. I might be killed instead. Death Heavenly Tao was helpless. In fact, he had always had a bold guess. That was, the power Wang Ling had shown so far might not be his full strength. Back then, Tao Ancestor had divided the heavenly Tao into 3,000 heavenly Tao for nothing more than a balance of power. If there were other Ling Zhenren in this universe's parallel space, then when all these Ling Zhenrens combined, how strong would they be? But all of this was Death Heavenly Tao's guess and hypothesis. He didn't dare think about it any further. One Wang Ling was already enough to throw the heavenly Tao into chaos. If all the Wang Lings in the space were combined, wouldn't the entire heavenly Tao be exterminated? On the way back to Earth, Death Heavenly Tao found the girl frantically entering information in her little notebook. It looked like the harvest from the god's domain this time was quite great. What did you comprehend? Death Heavenly Tao asked. The seniors of the domain of the gods are indeed very strong, and their train of thought is very novel, Lotus Sun answered honestly. She recorded everything she saw in words, and then used her drawing tablet to record what she saw to prevent herself from forgetting. Junior sister Lotus Sun can actually draw? In the core world of Death Heavenly Tao, Zhuo was also amazed as he held the Buddha Golden Lotus. In a sense, the girl was very versatile in all aspects. I just picked it up randomly when I had nothing to do, Lotus Sun said modestly. A friendly reminder, Junior sister Lotus Sun, if you draw my Shifu's face on it, there's a high chance it'll turn into a mosaic. Zhuo said at that moment. The great shielding spell had been upgraded several times, and its shielding effect had become even stronger. Who knew what would happen in the end? Don't worry, Senior Zhuo, I didn't draw classmate Wang Ling's face at all. Look. This is what I drew. Lotus Sun made her painting public. She was drawing a scene of Wang Ling's virtual image fighting against the virtual images of the 6 great Tao gods. Virtual images couldn't be seen clearly to begin with. So the girl had only drawn the outline of Wang Ling's back. Then, she had drawn an ellipsis on his head. This is? Zhuo was stunned. This is classmate Wang Ling's real body. Lotus Sun stared at her painting and nodded with satisfaction. Zhuo, after the matter of Earth's upgrade was settled, Golden Lamp and Miss Awan returned to Earth before Death Heavenly Tao did. The monk's ability to shrink the Earth into inches was too heaven-defying, and was several times faster than Death Heavenly Tao's direct teleportation. Their next step was to go to Battle Sect and explain to Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal the matter of Earth's upgrade. When the time came for Earth to complete its upgrade, the whole of Earth would experience a terrifying tribulation. That was right, this wasn't a tribulation for cultivators. It was a tribulation for Earth. Earth needed to weather this tribulation before it could complete its upgrade. At that moment, all the team leaders had gathered in Battle Sect's True Venerate Hall. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, Immortal Jinyuan, Fang Xing and Crispy Noodles Tao Monarch of the security team were all present. The power of Divine Tao Star's Divine Crystal is extraordinary, so it's very easy to upgrade Earth. But whether or not Earth can withstand the heavenly tribulation is another question, said Miss Awan. What's a planet's heavenly tribulation like? Grenade-throwing senior immortal was puzzled. Most people actually didn't know much about this. Because almost no one had experienced a planet's tribulation before, the only person who might know was Immortal Jinyuan. He had been working on repairing Drought Star. Because of the complexity and scale of the project, the progress had been very slow. But Immortal Jinyuan had always enjoyed working on Drought Star. It was as fun as being an MC. Most cultivators use heavenly lightning as their main form of tribulation. At that moment, the monk said, "The power and scale of this heavenly lightning tribulation are related to one's realm. The higher one's realm, the greater the range and power of the heavenly lightning tribulation. But the scale of a planet's tribulation will definitely be global." What the monk means is that if Earth's tribulation isn't handled well, a lot of cultivators might be electrocuted. Miss Ah Wan echoed. Global. Grenade-throwing senior immortal was astonished. This was an upgrade for a planet's tribulation. Naturally, the power of the heavenly lightning tribulation would be unparalleled. If a cultivator outside was struck by it, they would probably die. I understand what you mean, Master. You want me to communicate with all the countries in the world so that cultivators can do their best to protect themselves from the heavenly tribulation? Fang Xing cupped his chin and shook his head. I don't think that's enough. It's like a flu outbreak. You can't make everyone obediently stay at home. There will always be people courting death who want to go out and take a look. Brother Fang's words make sense. Staying at home or using magic artifacts for protection is far from enough to solve the problem. At that moment, the monk shook his head. Senior Immortal, you're oversimplifying things. The scale of Earth's tribulation is certain to be global, but this humble monk never said that it had to be heavenly lightning tribulation. Actually, if it was heavenly lightning tribulation, it would be easy to deal with. They just needed to think of a way to guide it somewhere. Ling Jinren was a living human lightning rod. But Earth's tribulation wasn't as simple as heavenly lightning tribulation. This would be an attack launched by the condensed power of various planetary spirits like the spirit of the sun. As far as the monk knew, the energy of these planets' spirits came from the chaos of the universe. To put it bluntly, it was the same substance as the chaos in the middle circle of the unspeakable land. If a cultivator from the domain of the gods was soaked in it for 3 minutes, they would be done for. As for Earth cultivators, they would probably die if they touched it. Then, Master, do you have a solution? Grenade-throwing senior immortal asked at that moment. This humble monk has an egg. The monk said. Me too. Grenade-throwing senior immortal raised 2 fingers. 2. Golden lamp? The daily life of an immortal king. Chapter 1294. The monk took out his divine beast egg, which had been incubated for 300 lifetimes without bearing fruit. The entire egg was dark blue in color and had a crystal-like texture. There were purple patterns on the outside of the eggshell that looked like they were carved, which reflected beautiful light in the light. Master, do you mean to draw all the energy that erupts during Earth's tribulation into this egg? Grenade-throwing senior immortal understood. That's right. The monk nodded. The power of chaos has the characteristic of mutual attraction. This poor monk's egg was nurtured by chaos, and is suitable to be used as a primer. In fact, it wasn't hard to find a magic weapon that contained the power of chaos. The heads of the major clans in the domain of the gods probably had one. World-defying magic weapons weren't rare in the domain of the gods. But a world-defying magic weapon infused with the power of chaos was priceless. If a world-defying magic weapon contained the power of chaos, it could substantially increase its power. A world-defying magic weapon with 1% of the power of chaos could increase its power by 5%, even if it only contained a trace of its original power. This was also why Tao gods were so keen on raising divine beasts. These creatures, which were born from chaos, were naturally infused with the power of chaos into divine weapons. They were similar to enhanced syringes. Using something from a divine beast, such as its horns, hair and so on, as supplementary materials to strengthen a world-defying magic weapon, there was a small probability that the magic weapon would gain the power of chaos. Golden Lamp's divine beast egg had been extracted from chaos a long time ago. But the difference between it and other Tao gods was that there should be some movement in normal chaos after 10 or 20 lifetimes. The monk's egg seemed to be particularly special. Like Neza, it refused to come out no matter what, so the monk had thought of using Earth's tribulation this time. This poor monk has his own selfish motives, but I hope that everyone can help me, the monk said to everyone. It's just a matter of convenience. Master, you're too polite. I also want to know what on earth will be born from this egg of yours. After saying that, Senior Immortal turned around and took out his phone to make several calls. During this time, Senior Immortal spoke as many as 7 or 8 different languages. Upgrading the Earth was a major event. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had already asked Washio Alliance for instructions, and hoped that the head of state could consult with the leaders of various cultivation countries. This was beneficial to all the cultivators on Earth. On one hand, it solved the problem of insufficient spirit chi. On the other hand, it allowed the true immortal realm to be further liberated. Done. "10 minutes later, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal turned around and replied, this afternoon, Guoping, the planet's diplomatic envoy, will come to Battle Sect to meet His Majesty King Kai in person. Everyone will determine the specific time for Earth's upgrade. I'll have to trouble Kai-sama with this matter. This matter should be settled as soon as possible. The initial date is Tuesday, December 1st, although Tyrant was the one who brought up the idea of upgrading the Earth, Tyrant was not the only one. However, Tyrant didn't want too many people to know his identity. It was actually suitable for Miss Ah-wan to handle this matter. It would be better to directly establish Divine Tao Star on the surface in order to have more friendly exchanges with Earth, to actively upgrade Earth, and to benefit all cultivators on Earth. Hey. Will there be a reward if I show up? The young girl put her hands on her hips and asked confidently. This humble monk can provide Miss Ah-wan with 3 additional consecration services. The tyrant smiled. Deal. Miss Ah-wan nodded. At that moment, the tyrant sighed silently in his heart. This world king of the divine world was too easy to coax. Since he was already on Earth, wouldn't it be better to directly ask Ling Jinren for an enlightenment spell? This enlightenment spell was more powerful than his consecration spell. Elsewhere, Patriarch Zhou woke up from his coma. His whole body was covered in bandages. His head in particular was wrapped up tightly, and his whole body reeked of medicinal liquid. In the end, he still had the heritage of a great family. His family's medicine storehouse was stocked with rare godly medicines and spirit plants for use at this critical moment. As soon as Patriarch Zhou woke up, he saw 6 men sitting around his bed, and was so startled that he almost fainted again. Why are you here? They were the other heads of the 6 families who had been beaten up. After being carried back by their respective clan elders for treatment, it didn't take long for them to wake up one after another. Patriarch Zhou was the last to wake up. We had something important to discuss, but you were the most seriously injured, so we came early to wait for you to wake up, said Patriarch Sheng. His head had been hammered into his collarbone by the monk earlier. After returning to the family, the Sheng clan elder had mobilized several people to pull his head out of his body and put it back in its place. The 7 great Tao gods had suffered a crushing defeat in the battle with the cultivators from Earth. This was something that no one had expected. Is that monk gone? Patriarch Zhou's heart was still fluttering with fear. He had been hit hard by the monk's heavenly hammer, and had felt like he had almost died. Patriarch Zhou, I think you're focusing on the wrong thing. Patriarch Sheng shook his head. This monk was indeed very powerful, but the problem was that the one who had really traumatized them wasn't the monk. It was that terrifying figure from Earth. Don't blame Patriarch Zhou. He was seriously injured by the monk's hammer, and actually has no idea what happened afterwards. The other head sighed. They actually envied Patriarch Zhou. His Tao God brain had been destroyed as soon as that young expert from Earth's heavenly hand had appeared. Fortunately, it had been destroyed quickly enough, and Patriarch Zhou hadn't been able to fully react. After that, he had been hit by the monk's hammer, so he naturally didn't know how terrifying Wang Ling was. In contrast, the other 6 Dao gods had faced Wang Ling's in a head-on confrontation with their virtual bodies, and then been beaten up en masse. That kind of mental blow was truly indescribable. The other heads couldn't help sighing with emotion. After this upgrade, I think it won't be long before Earth catches up to the domain of the gods. 100 years? Maybe 1,000 years? Maybe it won't even take that long. Compared to all that, I just want to know when such a figure appeared on Earth. Could he be a Dao ancestor? He can't be a Dao ancestor. We all know this very well. It looks like the Gu, Wang, and Lu families already knew the details, and deliberately didn't make a move this time. That's right. Now that our cultivation has been damaged, I'm afraid the gap between us and the 3 clans will widen. The Lu clan's foundation is not strong to begin with, but after this incident, it is very likely that they will surpass us and step on our heads. At that moment, Patriarch Shou, who had just woken up from his serious injuries, understood. So what do you mean? In our current state, we definitely can't suppress the Wang and Gu families, since we can't beat them to begin with, but we can still bully the Lu family. Patriarch Xing said, the 7 of us have lost all our dignity in this battle, and all the forces in the domain of the gods will definitely have some complaints about this. Taking it out on the Lu family is one way to suppress them, and the other is to intimidate them. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.